Number 10. Noir. In Marvel's Noirverse of Earth 90214, the X-Men are actually troubled youth and delinquents who are brought together by Charles Xavier, a controversial psychiatrist who believed that sociopathy was the next state of human evolution. Instead of attempting to redeem the youth whom he took into his school, the Xavier School for Exceptionally Wayward Youth, he worked to train them even further in their criminal arts. While some of them were exceptionally dangerous, at the end of the day, this version of the X-Men were just young criminals who were humans. So, yeah. But they did have guns, so there is that. Number 9. 1602. The X-Men of Earth 311 are surprisingly powerful for the time period in which they live, 1602. In this reality, mutants are instead called Witchbreed, and the team of X-Men are an Elizabethan reflection of the Earth 616 original team. Carlos Xavier is their teacher and head, while Scotius Summerisle is their leader and is joined by the ice-wielding Robert Trefusis, a beast like Henry McCoy, and the powerful telekinetic and telepath disguised as a boy, Jean Grey. Together, this team managed to help save their reality when a rift was caused due to all these heroes basically coming into existence so early, destabilizing it. In the end, Jean died from overuse of her powers, making her weaker than her 616 counterpart, but overall, the team is still pretty strong, especially for this time period, like I said. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, I don't know if there's 10 more alternate versions of the X-Men, but we can definitely do something in this realm. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. And also, go check out our Top 10 Nerd Elite, our new channel, and make sure you subscribe to that where we're gonna have lots of bonus content for you. Number 8. Earth Z. The X-Men were some of the last heroes standing up against the zombie horde on Earth 2149, or Earth Z. While Professor X was quickly devoured, Magneto stepped in to become the leader and encouraged the X-Men to fight to kill their opponents, as opposed to just, trying to hold them off. Otherwise, he warned the heroes would easily be overcome. Gone were the days of fighting to incapacitate their enemies. Wolverine himself seemed very much on board with this, and when Nick Fury called a meeting of the surviving heroes to explain the situation on the SHIELD helicarrier, many of the X-Men could be spotted amongst their numbers. Surviving in Marvel Zombies, even just for that initial wave, is pretty impressive considering how many iconic and powerful heroes didn't make it. In fact, when they're with Nick Fury, I'm pretty sure I counted 9 of them, which I think is pretty impressive. Number 7. Days of Future Past. The X-Men team from Earth 811 didn't do too hot, and ultimately ended up trapped in a post-apocalyptic situation where the world was ending and Sentinels were killing just about everything. Although they ultimately failed in their attempt to travel to the past to fix it to save the future, with Rachel Summers transporting Kitty Pryde back in time to the body of her younger self, Kitty still found a way to save the day when she returned as Widget, and with help from an alternate Excalibur team and alternate Rachel Summers, deprogrammed the Sentinels, turning them into Protectrons of a sort who would work to defend the mutants instead of destroy them. Basically, I feel like Days of Future Past is just powerful because of Kitty, but that's just my opinion. Anyways, Kitty's pretty powerful, Kitty and Rachel, so that's all we really need. Number 6. Ultimate, or Ultimates, if you will. Earth 1610. In the ultimate reality, the X-Men were born out of a break between Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto's Eric Lehnsherr. Here, the two were friends and like-minded individuals for a time who together founded the Brotherhood of Mutants. They lived together with their students in peace and harmony on the Savage Land, until a falling out drove them apart, due to Magneto believing in ruling humankind and Xavier disagreeing with that. Magneto was the one responsible for Professor X losing his ability to walk and ending up in a wheelchair, and Professor X ended up creating his own mutant group called the X-Men. Later, during the X-Men's fight against Magneto during Ultimatum, many members of the team died, but a few of the most powerful did manage to survive. The team members that survived included Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Rogue, Iceman, and Storm. And I think that was pretty much it, actually. Ugh.
Number 5. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde, as we know her, is known for her ability to phase herself and others through solid matter. She also has the ability on Earth 1610, but in this universe she discovered she can also minimize the negative space around her atoms, becoming super dense and granting herself extra dimensional mass, giving her enough strength to smash through concrete and metal and punch Spider-Man through the air, making her as hard as diamond and able to withstand attacks from the Phoenix. and making herself weigh 90 tons at peak mass. But that's as well as her phasing ability, which can allow her to walk on air and water. And that's before her exposure to Giant Man Serum to fight Galactus that leveled her up even more, allowing her to increase in size and gain a healing factor. Definitely one of my favorite Ultimate X-Men, and not just because of her romance with Peter Parker. Alright, number 4, Storm. The Omega level mutant known as Storm has a little bit of a different backstory compared to her main universe counterpart. On 1610, Aurora Monroe was an immigrant from Morocco who was found by Professor X living in Athens, Texas, where she'd been stealing cars for a living. When she took a 1978 Mustang for a joyride, the police finally caught up with her and Aurora used her powers to create a lightning storm to escape. Unlike her main universe counterpart though, she didn't have the training yet to control her powers to such a high degree and put some children in danger when she summoned the lightning storm, which eventually allowed the police to catch her. Xavier sent Jean Grey to convince the Athens authorities that Aurora was actually an FBI agent and that she was sent to relieve them of the mutant, and she went on to join the X-Men. She is much more sarcastic and rebellious and also had relationships with both Beast and Wolverine. She didn't just create storms, she created drama. Number 3. Iceman. In the 616 reality, Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, was one of the original X-Men and has achieved the classification of Omega level with his powers of cryokinesis and hydrokinesis. Now, in the Earth 1610 reality, he is actually one of the youngest members of the group, and it's almost as if he was kind of given a power boost. I know that doesn't make sense. How can you like boost an Omega level character? You can't. But he wields his powers in more interesting ways. He has always been able to transform his body, but he also creates gigantic ice trolls and ice walls. He's proven his worth by stopping a Weapon X invasion and the Ultimates all on his own. Professor Xavier himself has claimed that Iceman is one of the 3 most powerful X-Men, and he's probably not wrong. But I do gotta say, I don't know what they were thinking giving him the do-rag. I don't get it. Number 2, Professor X. In the Ultimate Universe, much like in the main one, Charles Xavier was the most powerful telepath on Earth, possessing vast psionic abilities and was known as one of the most powerful mutants ever. His mutant abilities give him telepathy, astral projection, and this version experiences some telekinetic skills as well, unlike his 616 version. He is also a genius with skills in surgery, therapy, and biochemistry. The only thing that I would say is both kind of a power boost and a bit of a caveat is the fact that while he's a good guy, he is also somewhat corrupt, or like very corrupt, as well as very manipulative. He willingly reads and messes with the minds of others, like Bobby Drake, who had a girlfriend when he first joined the X-Men who almost convinced him to leave the team, so Xavier erased her from Bobby's memory. It's kinda really messed up. He even created the mutant drug Banshee. Like, sure, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but that doesn't really make it okay, you know what I mean? And number 1, it's Jean Grey. Did you think it was going to be anyone else? As an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic, she is already a pretty tough character to take on. But as almost all of us know, Jean Grey is the host for the Phoenix Force, and that still remains the case here on Earth 1610. Only, she seems to use even more of that power. Unleashing a small fraction of her power melted the armor of Apocalypse, but her full might against him tore him apart atom by atom, causing him so much pain Apocalypse begged her to stop. Apocalypse begged her to stop. As the Phoenix, she reversed time, read people's minds, saved the whole team multiple times, and took off into space, literally traveling to what was essentially heaven. There is a reason people fear Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force gives them all the more reason to poop their pants.
Number 10. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom are the children of Storm and Dr. Doom. They come from the novel series X-Men: The Chaos Engine, which is actually a trilogy, wherein we explore what would happen if 3 great villains took control of the Marvel Universe, creating their own version of a perfect world using the Cosmic Cube. It starts off with Doom's variation on this world. In this reality, Dr. Doom has made Storm his wife, and she rules by his side as his Empress. The union of these powerful characters produces two children, Kristoff and Kadira. We can assume, of course, being the children of both Doom and Storm, that they would be physically, mentally, and demonstrably powerful when it came to their abilities, especially being raised by these two powerhouses. Also, if I wasn't clear about this is an alternate reality, so if you're like, when did this happen? It is not main continuity. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more children of the X-Men, they have a lot of kids if we, surf through the multiverse, so we could do it for you. If you want that part 3, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nocturne. Nocturne is the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Obviously, not from the main continuity. In fact, Talia Wagner is known for being a part of a multiversal hero team, the Exiles. Nocturne is from the alternate reality of Earth 2182. In fact, back on her home reality, which first appeared in Millennial Visions, Talia is also known as a member of the X-Men team, fighting alongside her father, Nightcrawler, who is actually their field leader. She is a low-level telepath with incredible superhuman agility skills, the ability to wall crawl, and the ability to fire powerful brimstone hex energy bolts, something inherited from both her father and her mother. Nocturne's physical appearance is also similar to her father's, a bit demonic looking, and of course, blue. All my blue X-Men. Top 10 blue X-Men. Actually, I feel like there's a lot of X-Men that are blue. Or mutants that are blue, maybe? There's a lot of blue mutants, for sure. I don't know about X-Men team members. Number 8. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine from the alternate reality of Earth 1610. His powers are similar to his father's, but in this reality they're believed to work a little bit differently. As opposed to just being insane healing powers, Jimmy's power set in this universe as a mutant is believed to be based more in survival. So these powers aren't necessarily just about healing, but survival instincts and capability, meaning that Jimmy is just much better at surviving and evolving to survive than anyone else alive on the planet. And I mean that because in this reality, Wolverine eventually dies, so really Jimmy is the only one left alive who's really good at surviving. Jimmy Hudson has also been bonded to a poison before and gained control of his poison, which are basically alien-like beings resembling symbiotes in look and abilities, but ultimately a different alien race themselves, called poisons. So yeah. Jimmy is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda Lencher, although Wolverine urges him through a letter when the truth of his connection to Jimmy is revealed that he actually shouldn't focus too much on, who his biological parents are. Jimmy was raised by adoptive parents. His dad actually served with Logan in the war and agreed to look after Jimmy in his father's place, even giving the young boy his own family name. Hudson. Number 7. Esme. Esme is one of the main Stepford Cuckoos. Well, I guess they're all pretty main, but you know what I mean. She's probably one of the most well-known if we're talking offhand about how many of the Cuckoos you can name. Esme and the other Cuckoos are basically like the children of Emma Frost, although as I've said before, not children that she had consensually. And I didn't say that before in this list, but if you've heard me talk about the Stepford Cuckoos and their relation to Emma, yeah. Instead, these were lab babies basically made from Emma's eggs that were stolen from Emma while she was in a comatose state. Esme, like the other Cuckoos, is kind of like a genetic clone as well as a child of Emma's, and Emma actually does consider the Cuckoos to be like her daughters. She treats them as though they were her own flesh and blood, and often her own responsibility, kinda stepping in to like play mom sometimes, although she does give them freedom to make their own mistakes. I guess what I mean is Emma isn't known for being like a controlling kind of parent. She's like, I'm here when you need me, otherwise you do you. More recently in the comics, Esme, known for her diamond form and powerful telepathic abilities, teamed up and primarily dated young Cable. Well, technically all the Cuckoos were dating him at one point, though I would say Esme was basically the main squeeze of young Cable, and the sister that he was most taken by while he was dating all of them. And if you're like, whoa, how did that happen? The Stepford Cuckoos, they share things because they're kind of like a hive mind. So they're like, we'll just all date this person. It's cool. Also Krakoa. Everyone's dating everyone. Number 6. Akihiro. Akihiro is the son of Wolverine and his wife Itsu. Unfortunately, before Akihiro was even born, his life took a turn for the worse. Along with inheriting his father's powers, I think he also inherited some of his tragic luck. Wolverine has the worst luck, I think. His mother, Itsu, was killed before she could give birth to him, assassinated. The child was believed dead, but in reality he had been cut from her womb and possibly, due to his inherited healing powers, miraculously survived. Although, that's not clear, because usually your powers don't manifest until puberty, but sometimes your powers manifest when you're in the womb. I mean, look at Professor X with Cassandra Nova, apparently that's a thing that happened. Akihiro would grow up and become a pawn of the villain known as Romulus. For most of his life, he'd also be known as Daken, a cruel nickname given to him when he was a child, being raised by his adoptive parents. The nickname was given to him because of his mixed race appearance, being part American and part Japanese. Though to be clear, his parents weren't the ones that gave it to him. It was people around his parents. Akihiro's powers are similar to Wolverine's, though his bone claws are a little bit different in terms of placement and appearance. Like his father, Akihiro is also known for being a skilled fighter as well. The apple does not fall far from the tree when it comes to fighting abilities. Number 5. Age of Apocalypse. In the alternate reality of Earth 295, known as the Age of Apocalypse, the X-Men were one of the final superhero teams standing against the villainous tyrant known as Apocalypse. Of course, because it's his age. In this reality, many other superhero teams were wiped out and Magneto became the leader of the X-Men in Charles Xavier's stead after Professor X was killed when Legion traveled back in time and attempted to end Magneto. Charles put himself in the way of the kill shot, thereby dying and erasing Legion from existence, while also creating the Age of Apocalypse reality, where Apocalypse attacked Earth years earlier than in the main timeline. While Magneto's X-Men roster from this reality would change over time, the original roster consisted of Iceman, Storm, Colossus, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch, of course. Really the only X-Men team the once mutant children of Magneto have ever been on. Later on, the team would be joined by AOA Wolverine, known as Weapon X, and Rogue, who would later also become Magneto's lover and eventually wife in this reality.
Number 4. Excalibur. Excalibur first appeared in Excalibur Special Edition number 1 by the legendary Chris Claremont and Alan Davis in December of 1987. They are a government-sponsored team of extraordinary mutants who fight for the people of jolly old England and their interests around the globe. The team is usually formed by British heroes and former members of the X-Men and was originally assembled with hopes to carry on Charles Xavier's dream and legacy, but their adventures usually deal with magical and interdimensional crises linked to the pocket dimension of Otherworld. The team right now is made up of Captain Britain Betsy Braddock and formerly Captain Britain Brian Braddock, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Phoenix, Magan, Captain Avalon, Gambit, Gloriana, Jubilee, Richter, and Shatterstar. But the team has included awesome heroes like Black Knight, Colossus, Dazzler, Juggernaut, Lockheed, Moira McTaggart, Rogue, and Sage, and was reformed under Apocalypse as a mutant diplomatic organization in Krakoa, the UK, and in Otherworld. One of the best X-Men adjacent team variations ever, in my humble opinion.
Number 3. X-Force. In principle, X-Force should be one of the most powerful teams out there because they usually aim to kill. But there are some other teams on here that are known for having simply more Omega level mutants on their most powerful rosters, which is why I hesitated to put X-Force too close to the top, although they're pretty up there still. X-Force initially, though, started as Cable's team, who himself is known for being on the verge of Omega level, possibly the techno-organic virus being one of the main things holding him back from that status. The X-Force was originally Cable's Black Ops team, used for taking out those he deemed threats to the timeline, but would later become more known as Wolverine's team, and at one point was also Sabretooth's team. Currently in the comics, X-Force is actually more thought of as Beast, aka Hank McCoy's team, although Wolverine is still a major player on it. There was a recent incarnation of the team that included Omega level telepath Jean Grey on its roster as well.
Number 2. Multiversal X-Men. Gonna be honest here, this one's a little wacky. As an example, at one point the Kurt Wagoner on the team used a collection of hundreds of disembodied Professor Xavier heads to search the multiverse for a habitable planet for the population of Earth 12245. And then he teleported them all to that new world. That alone puts the team high on the list, but the other members just bring the team comfortably to the number 2 spot. A Wolverine that was Governor General of Dominion of Canada, who was in a romantic heroic duo with the demigod Hercules, who gave Wolverine adamantine bones, and who was also on the team. Emmeline Frost Summers, who was granted the immortality of a goddess. Catherine Pride, who goes by Shadow and is as equally powered as her 616 self. A genius disembodied head of Xavier, that's by itself. Corporal Scott Summers, Summers, who fought in and ended the American Civil War in 2 weeks, having dispatched about 6,000 Confederate soldiers, and regular old Dazzler. They came together thanks to the villain Savior, but fought against 10 evil Xaviers, including a Witch King and Cthulhu Xavier, that were trying to destroy reality.
Number 1. The Five. The Five have to be one of the most powerful mutant teams to have ever existed at this point in the main continuity, or if not, they would still have to be pretty high up there, I'd think. The Five are an offshoot mutant team whose job it is to make sure that all mutants are brought back to life. They were brought together to bring back all mutants who had ever passed on previous to the present time and age of the X-Men. Their ranks include multiple Omega level mutants, and they have literally mastered control over one of the most powerful governing principles of the cosmos, that of life and death. I know, it's pretty crazy. Their ranks include Hope Summers, Elixir, Proteus, Egg, and Tempest.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty Vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace. Which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel Universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel Universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities, a favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 6, we're taking a bit of a break from the comics with the Wolverine symbiote from the video game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this game's story, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the usual symbiote enhancements, this version of Wolverine might just be the scariest he's ever been.
Number 5. Cable. Cable is the son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, non-X member Madeline Pryor, who later becomes the villain known as the Goblin Queen, Wolverine, and another X-Man's, Jean Grey, who kind of becomes like an adoptive mother but who also possesses Madeline's memories of raising baby Christopher. Because comics. Cable is Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, often referred to as just Nathan Summers or really just Cable, although back in the day we did know him as Baby Christopher. Cable as a baby was kidnapped by Apocalypse and infected with the techno-organic virus. This is the only thing that makes him weak-ish, but really he is still amazingly strong as he can even fend off that virus, containing it to one side of his body using his psionic powers. That in and of itself is pretty impressive as the techno-organic virus is generally known for being, well, unstoppable. Even with his psionic powers mainly preoccupied, Cable is still a hard one to beat, as he has so many combatant-based skills that he brings to the table, and he is also an experienced time traveler besides. Number 4. Rachel Summers. Yes, get ready because many of the most powerful X-Kids out there just happen to be Summers related, so yeah, get ready for that. Honestly, I've always wanted to do a video just to explain the complicated nature that is the Summers and Grey family tree, which honestly is a lot, and it's very timey-wimey. Rachel herself is one of those very complex kids of theirs. She is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth of 811. In that reality, she was made into a hound, a weapon used to hunt down mutants, even being one herself. Rachel is an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic who also has the ability to chronoskim and manipulate time, even traveling through it. Rachel is also known for being an avatar of the Phoenix, at one time actually considered the true avatar for it, but then later having the power sort of dialed down to a mere echo of it. So she was no longer the true avatar, they were just like, you just have a thing, and it's not even like the real Phoenix Force, but it's like a version of it. Still, the seeming piece or echo of the Phoenix Force that resides within her has been known to flare up from time to time, or her connection to the Phoenix Force, however we want to see that, occasionally boosting Rachel to an off-the-charts level of power. But like I said, that doesn't happen all the time. Number 3. Hope Summers. Hope is the adopted daughter of Cable, who was originally known as the Mutant Messiah Baby. Cable saved Hope from Bishop, who basically wanted to destroy her. In Bishop's reality, the Mutant Messiah would end up causing the event that led to the oppression and persecution of mutants. However, in Cable's reality, the Mutant Messiah would grow up to become a savior, so you can see why these two were opposed on this topic. For the X-Men of Earth 616, the Mutant Messiah was the first new mutant to have been born since basically M-Day, and so she brought hope to the mutants of the 616 reality. Cable body-slided with Hope to another time to raise her in safety. He would end up naming Hope after her adoptive mother, his love who died, Hope, and she got the Summers name from Cable himself. But although she looks a lot like Jean, she actually has no biological relation to the Summers or the Grey families, at least not that we know of. Hope's mutant abilities allow her to copy the powers of anyone within a certain range. Hope also gains access to these powers without struggling at all to use them, receiving them basically at their peak level and with the auto knowledge basically of how to use them. So if you're like, oh, she's gotta like figure it out, no, she's just like instant god mode with those powers basically. Number 2. Scarlet Witch. Wanda is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. She has used her powers to completely warp reality the world over, and her chaos magic has pulled off other immensely world-changing feats, such as flipping the alignment of all major heroes and villains in the comics during the events of Axis. Initially, her chaos magic powers were believed to be somewhat mutant in origin. In fact, they were kind of presented initially as like Jinx-like mystical mutant abilities during her first appearances. However, we've since learned that both Wanda and her superpowered brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, were never really mutants at all, nor were they related to Magneto. However, they still spent a good amount of their life around Magneto, who secretly believed them to be his children, and then another good amount of time thinking that he was their actual father, until it was revealed that this was all due to manipulation by the High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary just coming in and messing pretty much everybody up when it comes to their backstories and origins. Wanda herself has never really gotten along with the X-Men, especially since the events of M-Day, but she is still considered, I think, a part of Magneto's family, and a powerful one at that, regardless of her status as a mutant or a non-mutant. I know there are some people out there that want to be like, it never happened, but like, they still spent a lot of time together thinking that they were family, so I think we can still count it, friends. Also, make Wanda a mutant again. Do it. Make it happen. Give me Wanda and Quicksilver back. Number 1. X-Man. X-Man is Nathaniel Grey, the lab-born child made by combining the genetic materials of both Jean Grey and Cyclops. So basically like Cable, but if he had been made perfectly by villain Mr. Sinister. He actually hails from the alternate reality of AOA, Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295. Here, Sinister created him to use as his own weapon, but of course, Nate being so powerful, managed to escape Sinister and instead ended up being raised by Forge of Earth 295. He is He's considered one of the most powerful mutants of all time, which would also make him one of the most powerful children of the X-Men out there. Nate can warp reality, resurrect the dead, resurrect himself, travel to alternate Earths and dimensions, and even manipulate the time stream. He's basically the most OP of characters when it comes to the Marvel Universe. And if you've seen artwork of him, you will probably recognize him as someone who looks like Mutant Jesus, which yes, he is god level, so that is the point. Number 10. X-Baby. This alternate baby comes to us from the short stories that make up X-Millennial Visions 2000. Here in the story titled Bringing Up Baby, we learn of a son that Jean and Scott both have together in this alternate future. The story shares a conversation the two have, an argument regarding Jean being pregnant. She wants to keep the baby, Scott is contemplating them not having the baby, considering all the problems that then could arise from that. What if something happened? What if he just isn't ready? He's scared, and considering his track record with this kind of situation, I can't say I blame him. Jean keeps pressing though. What if their child has superpowers and can defend themselves? Look at Reed Richards and Sue Storm. They are both heroes and parents. It could work. The next page shows a picture of their son that I guess they agreed to have, who seems to have his father's eyes and his mother's telekinetic powers even as a baby. Their parents look on, slightly amazed and terrified. I feel like raising a super baby would be really hard. Also, where did they get those X-Men brand diapers? Number 9. Summers Twins. The Summers Twins are the children of Emma Frost and Scott Summers. They have a bit of a Cuckoo's vibe to them, but also have darker eyes and freckles than the Cuckoos, resembling Emma a little less and Scott a little more. They have psionic powers which allow them to create solid psionic objects similar to Psylocke's weapons. In the reality of Earth 41001, which they originate from, they are not the only children of Emma and Scott either. Their mother is very protective of both of them, as well as all of her and Scott's children. In this reality, Scott and Emma are actually married. Number 8. Strife. Strife is the evil clone of Cable, who is the biological offspring of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor. He was created to be a fail-safe child should the young baby Nathan die, succumbing to the techno-organic virus that plagued him. Creating this clone who would grow up to become Strife was the decision of Mother Ascani, who knew of baby Nathan's prophesied importance. Strife was also brought into the world with the same techno-organic virus that plagued his twin, but as Clan Ascani were present for his entire growth cycle, they were able to actually minimize the infection, reducing the risk of it becoming lethal. Both children ended up surviving, but shortly after, Apocalypse busted in and the Ascani were only able to save one of the two babies. The baby they saved was actually the true son of Scott, Nathan Summers. Apocalypse thought he had captured baby Cable, but he'd actually retrieved his clone, Strife, instead. Strife as such was raised by Apocalypse to become his powerful weapon and potentially become the perfect body for Apocalypse to transfer himself into in the future. He was also pretty much raised to be evil, so yeah. Number 7. Megan Summers. Megan Summers is the telepathic daughter of both Scott Summers and Emma Frost. She is from the reality of Earth 41001, where they are married. She is the older sister to the Summers twins we talked about earlier, and her youngest sibling Alex, named after the deceased Uncle Alex, aka Havoc. She also studied at the Xavier Institute and was training to become a hero like her parents before her. Number 6. Ruby Summers. Ruby Summers is the daughter of Scott Summers and Emma Frost, and comes from the alternate reality that is also the home reality of Bishop, Earth 1191. Ruby ended up being named by Layla Miller herself, who suggested the name to both her parents. Her mother in this reality is dead, but Scott is still alive, although he is part cyborg in this alternate future reality. Ruby also becomes motivated by Layla to continue the dream of the X-Men and fight for mutant freedom. Her powers are similar to her father's, but she has full control over her optic blasts. She can shapeshift into her Ruby form, which is similar to her mother's Diamond form, and while in this form she does not age, nor does she require food or water to survive.
Number 5. Days of Future Past. Wolverine in the Days of Future Past storyline comes from a future world that has become apocalyptic because of the Sentinels, which basically eradicated mutants by the thousands and ended up enslaving the planet, both mutant and humankind alike. Now Wolverine, who in this future is older and by extension more experienced, is a more powerful version of his 616 counterpart. He still has all the powers of the regular Wolverine, but he just works a lot smarter. Unfortunately, he still ends up passing when a Sentinel destroys him, leaving only his adamantium skeleton behind. But thanks to comics being comics, this version is revived and appears again much later on in Earth X, standing in for this Earth's Wolverine, who had finally married and settled down with Jean Grey, which I think makes him more powerful, but he also really settled, grew a rather large gut, and seems to have completely distanced himself from his former self. Jean also abandons her former life and is now an out-of-shape housewife chasing after their kids and resenting her choice to marry Logan. So yes, Days of Future Past Logan was needed here for sure. Number 4, Old Man Logan. In the alternate universe where we are introduced to Old Man Logan and Old Man Hawkeye, everything is in shambles. It's an apocalyptic wasteland, and all because the villains, under the leadership of the Red Skull, had coordinated a massive attack on the world's superheroes, leaving only a very few alive. Logan himself was tricked into wiping out every single member of the X-Men, and while that is tragic, I do have to say that's incredibly impressive. Like, damn. Impressive or not, it drove Logan mad with grief and he vowed to become a pacifist. He retired to a quiet farming family life, letting the world go to hell around him, but we need a story, so that can't fly. Eventually, being short on money and needing to help his family, he joins Hawkeye on an adventure across America to deliver a briefcase of super soldier serum. After he goes on this grand adventure, defeats the Red Skull, and returns home, the Hulk gang has decimated his family. This is when he finally pops his claws for the first time since the story began, and ooh, it's satisfying. He wipes out the entire gang and eviscerates the Hulk himself, and then eventually finds his way to the main Marvel universe. Another version of him even gets the powers of Venom as well. So cool. Number 3, Weapon Omega. After the Mutant Legion went back in time and accidentally took the life of his pops, Xavier, Apocalypse came out of hibernation 10 years too early and took over control of the United States. Enter the Age of Apocalypse storyline. The Logan of Age of Apocalypse is extremely ferocious and he goes by the name Weapon X. He has only one hand after having it blasted off by Cyclops, but his claws still pop through the nub, which is kind of alarming. He and Jean Grey set off apart from the X-Men to save mutants and stop Apocalypse, but Weapon X eventually becomes the new Apocalypse, gaining his celestial and mutant powers to try and stop aliens from destroying the population of Earth. Yes, it's nuts, but I suggest you check out this story because it's super cool. Number 2, General James Howlett. In the second volume of Extreme X-Men, joining a team of multi-dimensional mutants that hunt down evil Xaviers across many dimensions is a much different version of Wolverine. Hailing from the reality of Earth 12025, this version of our feral mutant is the Governor General of the Dominion of Canada and Viceroy of Her Majesty's expedition to Shangri-La. He is like a version of Wolverine who is also mixed with President Theodore Roosevelt but still Canadian. General James Howlett is an adventurer and hero alongside his partner and lover, the demigod Hercules, or Heracles if you prefer and want to get smarmy in the comments. These two shared a love that was built after years and years of working together, and their bond was so strong that Herc gave James a super cool upgrade in the form of a skeleton made of adamantine, which is a godly golden metal even stronger than adamantium, making Wolverine completely indestructible and immune to telepathic attacks. Unfortunately, due to the god-on-mortal nature of the relationship, the Greek gods banish the pair to Tartarus, where they fight hordes and hordes of lost and damned souls for like 4 years. His penchant for big booms and affinity for political service make him a fun take on this character, and the beard? Oh, it's classic. And in at number 1 is Phoenix Logan. The Phoenix Force embodies life in the Marvel Universe. It is incredibly powerful, and when it chooses a host, that being becomes a force to be reckoned with, which is funny how it always seems to happen to characters who are already pretty damn unstoppable by themselves. Old Man Phoenix is an alternate reality version of Wolverine from Earth 14112, which features a story that is actually revolved around old King Thor. Now, Wolverine's past resembles his Earth 616 counterpart, but it's a little different, because after Loki destroyed everyone on Earth, including Wolverine, the Phoenix Force chose Wolverine as its avatar, resurrected him, and granted him its powers. So what we have here is Wolverine's regenerative healing factor, retractable adamantium claws, and enhanced senses combined with the Phoenix's psionic powers, cosmic pyrokinesis, and flight. These factors come together to make him one of the most powerful entities in his universe, even more powerful than old King Thor himself.
Number 10. Azure Nightcrawler. In Marvel's Mangaverse, X-Men, we meet Azure Nightcrawler. In this world, he's a mutant criminal affiliated with the Azure, a team of blue-skinned evil mutants including Beast and Mystique. This version of Nightcrawler is even more demon-like than usual and wears some intimidating red ninja armor. He battles against Wolverine and Moonstar, confronting them while they're searching for Rogue. Surprisingly, he holds his own well against them until Cyclops arrives. He's eventually defeated at the hands of Wolverine, who brutally cuts off his tail and later impales Nightcrawler's head with his claws. Number 9. Prisoner Nightcrawler. In Ruins Volume 1, published in 1995, we follow the story of reporter Philip Sheldon, infected with a virus, as he travels around a horribly warped and twisted world, interviewing heroes and famous figures and trying to figure out what went wrong in this universe. During the story, Sheldon visits a special prison containing several heroes, including some of the X-Men, with Wilson Fisk acting as the prison warden. The prisoners are deformed and tortured from their captors' efforts to control their powers, and in one of the prison cells, we see Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, reduced to a frail gray creature covered in filth. We see him locked away and cannibalizing his own tail. Pretty dark. Number 8. Alpha Nightcrawler. First appearing in X-Men Alpha number 1 in 1995, this version of Nightcrawler had a traumatic experience that caused him to despise religion, unlike his counterpart from the Prime Marvel universe. Professor X dies in this universe, and Nightcrawler joins Magneto's X-Men to stop Apocalypse from dominating the world. This version of Nightcrawler has some pretty dark moments, including killing Deadpool by teleporting his head off and nearly taking down Wolverine in a one-on-one showdown. Eventually, he meets a real hero's death, sacrificing himself to imprison the exterminators in another universe. Number 7. Dark Crawler. In Incredible Hulk number 126 from 1970, we meet Nightcrawler, Chunky Edition. Dark Crawler is an ancient enemy of the Undying Ones, demons who ruled the Earth thousands of years ago. They once sent the Hulk after him, and in the battle that followed, Dark Crawler's big scepter was broken and he was pulled into the Undying One's dimension. There, he defeated the Undying Ones and their leader, the Nameless One. Nightcrawler then became their new leader and earned the title Dark Crawler. His deadly scepter of shadow and creepy red eyes make him a sinister dark counterpart to Nightcrawler, landing at number 7 on our list. Number 6. Egyptia. This version of Nightcrawler, found in Secret Wars Journal number 1, was part of a plot to overthrow the Barris Khonshu of Egyptia. This Nightcrawler is almost ape-like, like an Egyptian monkey samurai version of Nightcrawler. During the showdown, Spectre, aka Moon Knight, shows up and warns the rebels that the Baroness is indeed a goddess and her curfew exists for their own good. Spectre then transforms as a pack of man-wolves appear and charge the heroes, killing this super cool version of Nightcrawler. He's kind of like a side character in this story.
Coming in at number 5, we have the villainous Raze Darkholme. Hailing from a dark alternate future where Wolverine and Mystique had a son, Raze is an even more powerful shapeshifter than his mother, with all of the bloodlust and rage of his father unleashed. Traveling to the main Marvel timeline and impersonating Kitty Pryde in order to get close enough to strike at his father, Raze planned to wipe out humanity in this reality in order to create a safe haven across the multiverse for all of mutant kind, and was willing to do anything and impersonate anyone to achieve it. Coming in at number 4, we've got to go with something a little more live action than the rest of these comic books, with X-24 from the movie Logan. An allegedly perfect clone of Wolverine, but with none of the compassion or humanity, X-24 was treated like an attack dog and followed the orders of Xander Rice to hunt down and capture the real Wolverine and the young mutant girl he was protecting. Based on Wolverine during his prime years, he was able to physically overcome the true Wolverine and was only able to be defeated by a bullet made of pure adamantium to the back of the head. Talk about overkill. Coming in at number 3, we have Hulk Jr. And no, I promise this didn't suddenly become a list about Bruce Banner's kids. In the alternate future that's often seen in stories involving Old Man Logan, Hulk Jr. is the last surviving grandson of Bruce Banner, and the last member of the infamous and cannibalistic Hulk gang. Following their defeat by Wolverine, Logan decided to raise this young gamma-mutated child as a member of his own family. So while the two might not be biologically related, Hulk Jr. grew into a heroic figure because of how he was raised, and would go on to start a new generation of heroes on this post-apocalyptic world, bringing some hope to a land filled with tragedy. Coming in at number 2, we have Laura Kinney, aka X-23. Created by the Weapon X project when they were attempting to remake the success of Wolverine with a genetic sample that had a damaged Y chromosome, Laura is otherwise a perfect clone of Logan in every way. While her early years were traumatic and occasionally brought her into conflict with Wolverine and the X-Men, in recent years she's actually taken up the name of Wolverine herself, living up to the title that's inspired mutants for generations and helping carve out a new place for mutant kind in a new world. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Daken, the dark son of Wolverine. Named after the Japanese term for mongrel dog or bastard, Daken is the tragic child that Wolverine never knew about, his mother being murdered before Wolverine even knew he had a son. Cut from his mother's body, Daken was raised to hate his father, and in their very first encounter slashed open his stomach and left him to bleed to death. With the same incredible healing abilities and bone claws as his dad, Daken has had a long road of trying to find his proper place in the world, and has fought on the sides of both good and evil over the course of his tragic life. In recent years though, Daken does seem to have found some sense of belonging on the island of Krakoa, and has recently become a member of the new X-Factor team. Let's hope he can catch a little bit of a break from his life being so angsty.
Number 10. Madeline Pryor. You might consider having Madeline on this list today cheating since she is a clone of Jean Grey, but I don't care, she deserves to be talked about. Originally the love interest and first wife of X-Men leader Cyclops, Madeline was a frequent member of the X-Men supporting cast until a series of terrible events. You know, her husband leaving, losing her son, and finding out she's actually a clone, which led her down a path of villainy. It's discovered that when Phoenix took her own life, a fragment of the Phoenix Force entered the body of the clone, and that's what gave her life and sentience, which Sinister took as an opportunity to attract Scott so that the two could procreate and make one of the most powerful mutants out there. Since Madeline was cloned from Jean Grey's DNA, she was essentially another version of Jean, and possessed Jean's telekinetic and telepathic abilities, although it's never stated if she was actually classified as an Omega level mutant as well. During the 2012 Avengers vs. X-Men storyline, Mr. Sinister had created a group of 6 Madeline Pryor clones in order to take the Phoenix Force energies from the Phoenix 5, consisting of the Phoenix Force empowered Cyclops, Colossus, Emma Frost, Magik, and Namor. Unlike the original Madeline, none of these 6 clones showed indication of having individual personalities or free will, but instead appeared to follow Sinister completely. The Madeline Pryor clones joined Sinister's other clone creations in fighting the Phoenix 5 and managed to defeat each one. They also were able to siphon some of the energy from the Phoenix Force, but they were all immediately killed by the entity itself. Check her out for yourself, starting with 1983's Uncanny X-Men number 168. Number 9. Stepford Cuckoos. Known as 3-in-1 and then later 4-in-1, 5-in-1, and 1000-in-1, the Stepford Cuckoos are the product of Weapon XIV, or Weapon 14. Meaning they are clones created from the genetic template of Emma Frost that were created for the purpose of killing every mutant on Earth. Thousands of these clones exist dormant, however only 5 were sent to infiltrate the Xavier Institute in order to hone their skills and gain intel. As mutants with powers similar to Emma Frost, the girls have shown that they are capable of telepathy, mind alteration, astral projection, and the infamous organic diamond form that give them psionic immunity, super strength, stamina, and durability. However, what sets them apart from Frost is that the Cuckoos can selectively harden parts of their bodies as needed. During the War Song storyline, an unstable fraction of the Phoenix Force sparked inside the girls, and their dormant Weapon Plus nanotech inside their bones was activated. This nanotech briefly reanimated Sophie and Esme, who directed their sisters back to the world to activate Sublime's plan for the destruction of the mutant race. The Phoenix and Sublime both wrestled for control of the Cuckoos until the X-Men arrived. Phoebe and Mindy were captured and integrated into Sublime's machine, but the Phoenix was able to possess Celeste. When Celeste was finally merged into the machine, the Phoenix was divided between all the Cuckoos and trapped in their newly emerged second mutation, their organic diamond hearts. Eventually, Celeste was able to take full control of the Phoenix, destroyed her sisters, and trapped the Phoenix fragments inside the 3-in-1's flawless diamond hearts, rendering them all emotionless. Check out these sisters for yourself, starting with their first appearance in 2001's New X-Men number 118. Number 8. Emma Frost, Earth 92,124. Hailing from Earth 92,124, an alternate reality where Amazonia conquered the world very early on, making females the dominant sex across the globe, slowly eliminating the male gene altogether, comes Emma Frost, the hero known as White Phoenix in this reality. This Emma Frost is said to possess all the powers of Emma Frost and the Phoenix Force, which already makes you think she's incredibly strong, and you'd be exactly right. These powers include, but are definitely not limited to, telepathy, mind cloaking, astral projection, mental paralysis, telekinesis, and of course, the organic diamond form that protects her from psychic attacks and also grants her super strength, stamina, and durability. White Phoenix was a member of the Avengers who worked with President R2 and helped capture the Y-Men leader Hercules. However, all but White Phoenix had grown disillusioned with the president and teamed up with Hercules and Gorgon in confronting her. White Phoenix stayed by the president's side but was held hostage by Wolverine, unfortunately. Give this Emma story a read for yourself in 2009's Incredible Hercules number 124 to number 125. Number 7. Quentin Quire. Also known as Kid Omega, Quentin joined the Xavier Institute after Professor X's return from averting a war with Genosha and the rebuilding of the X Mansion. Quire is depicted as an Omega-level mutant possessing advanced cognitive and telepathic abilities, which enable him to organize and construct his thoughts at accelerated rates, overtly or covertly manipulate the minds of others, resist mind probes, and disable other forms of psychic manipulation. His level of psychic influence on others depends on the number of people he wants to affect, meaning it's stronger when he focuses on less people, of course. After he was hurt pretty badly and was kept semi-alive in Beast's lab, he was found by the Phoenix Force, and although it didn't accept him as a host, it woke him up from his coma and reconstituted his body. He eventually heads out to find the Phoenix Force, and when he does, he winds up releasing it, asking it to revive Sophie, his love. Sophie refused to come back to life, and the Force left him to wallow in his own self-pity. Fast forward a bit and we see the Phoenix Force allow Quentin to absorb some of its power, which he ends up sacrificing to save Jubilee from dying. Now, although he didn't have it for long and didn't actually have access to the full powers of the Phoenix Force, he was still capable of interstellar travel, pyrokinesis, and of course, resurrection. Check out Quentin's story for yourself, starting with 2003's New X-Men number 134. Number 6. Hope Summers. The first mutant born after the House of M and Decimation storyline. According to Cable, the baby is a messianic figure destined to save both mutant and humankind, and he ends up becoming her adoptive father. However, there were some who didn't agree with his decision, as there was a timeline where she kills everyone instead of saving them. Hope is an Omega level mutant with the ability of unspecified limits to psychically manipulate and mimic the powers of other mutants. This is generally shown as a mimicry of the superhuman mutant abilities of those near her. However, she has demonstrated additional powers, like when she was born, when she unleashed a massive psionic pulse that destroyed Cerebro. During the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline, Hope is targeted by the Phoenix Force, and the X-Men want her to accept it because it could revive the dwindling mutant race. The Phoenix Force arrives, and instead of possessing Hope, it possesses and forms the Phoenix 5, and she is taken away to safety. Having learned about a previous Phoenix host who is also trained to become the Iron Fist of her era, Hope visits UT, but UT is unable to help her directly, instead instructing her to learn from Spider-Man based on a vision that he had. Although uncertain if he can teach her, Spider-Man proceeds to tell Hope of his mantra of great power requiring great responsibility, giving her more to think about in her role as the host of the Phoenix Force. He also teaches her about patience, and with these lessons, Hope fights alongside Scarlet Witch against Cyclops, and she not only takes on the full power of the Phoenix and restores the mutant race, but she stops Cyclops in the process. With her destiny fulfilled, she is shown departing Utopia to find a new place for herself. Give her story a read, starting with 2008's X-Men Volume 2, number 205.
Number 5. Summer Scott. AKA Starbolt, Summer comes from Earth 80827. She first appeared in New Exiles issue 9, the Soul Awakening storyline. She dives in during part 3. At just a young age, she was recruited into Emma Frost's X-Force, and the training here is quite brutal. Once her and her fellow X-Force team members meet the Exiles, they get defeated easily. Summer's team just isn't coordinated enough yet. But both teams later on combine their powers when they attack the French. Yeah, they take on a fleet in order to save the Queen. How epic is that? This universe's Bobby Drake, Orion, freezes the water while Starbolt rides a snowmobile towards the ship, of course using her optic blasts. It really doesn't get better than that, folks. I don't know what to tell you. Number 4. Basilisk. Okay, a little less fun than Ski-Doos and the High Seas. We now look to the Age of X timeline where mutants were despised and treated horribly. Scott, now known as Basilisk, first appears in Age of X Alpha issue 1. I made fun of Scott's visor in the Noir universe a little bit with like regular glasses, but here he doesn't even get one. In fact, he doesn't even get eyelids anymore in this universe. He now resides in Alcatraz, where the guards control where he looks, when he looks, and who gets executed because of it. He's literally a living weapon. He finally figured out a way to control his mask, and then he broke out, freeing all the other mutant prisoners, but that's a long time to not have eyelids. What a horrible, horrible time. He must win the staring contests that all the cellmates do. So mean. Sorry, Scott. Number 3, Sheriff Summers. Coming straight from the rootin' tootin' Wild West, Sheriff Summers makes his first ride in the pages of Extreme X-Men Volume 2, Issue 4. Dazzler and the team have to destroy 10 evil versions of Charles Xavier, and they of course have the help of, well, Xavier Head. The team meets the sheriff in the following issue, and he's blasting away on his horse next to Colossus, page 6. It's nice to see him here after what we just talked about. Now he's a sheriff, he's not a prisoner executing mutants. We're on the right path. I'm just kidding, evil Xavier was using him as a pawn. But we're getting better, we're getting better. Number 2, Ray Summers. The Amalgam Universe, so much fun. In the pages of DC Comics back in Smash Comics issue 14, the Ray made his first appearance. There's a link. He was exposed to extreme sunlight and lightning at the same time, and then in turn got these energy powers. So when you combine him with Scott Summers in JLX issue 1, you get the lovely Ray Summers, aka Apollo. While other amalgams are obvious and quite out there, like Super Soldier, Superman, and Captain America, this one's basically just Cyclops with more power. Sunlight makes Ray stronger, although he was raised from mutant-fearing parents that kept him locked inside, telling him the sun will kill him. Kind of like Nick Swardson from the Benchwarmers, for the select few who have seen that. The OG few who've seen that. He can absorb energy from the sun and blast it then out of his eyes. I don't blame the parents for being afraid, that sounds pretty wild. And finally, number 1. Ultimate Cyclops. The 1610 universe, aka the Ultimate Universe, this version of Summers first appeared in Ultimate X-Men issue 1. The team was younger in this run, so Cyclops was only in his teen years. But even so, he was leading this team. He would disagree with Xavier often, even going so far as to join the Brotherhood at one point. Scott can squash beef for the greater good. He allows Wolverine back in the crew, even though he previously tried to kill Scott. But he did end up with Jean Grey. It only took him a few years to get the courage to admit his feelings. Now, after his time as headmaster, Scott had a substance abuse problem. He was addicted to this drug called Banshee, so Jean had to help him through that one. Now, when Magneto's ultimatum wave hit New York and wiped out Scott's friends and teammates, he himself executed Magneto. But these wars don't end, so naturally Magneto's speedy son Quicksilver came and got payback using the same bullet that took the life of his sister, the Scarlet Witch.
Coming in at number 10 is Dark Claw. So, what happens if you take Logan Howlett and Bruce Wayne and just mash them up together? You subtract Robins, add some Canada, carry the two, and you'll find you get Logan Wayne. This awesome character is from the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602. Obviously, Bruce Wayne has no actual powers of his own unless you count his undeniable skill, so most of the abilities belonging to Logan Wayne come from his Wolverine half. A massively powerful regenerative healing factor, slowed aging, superhuman senses, plus his healing factor and adamantium skeleton allow him to have a degree of super strength. But thanks to his Wayne half of things, Dark Claw is a master detective and master of martial arts, stealth, acrobatics, and intimidation. After he witnessed the passing of his parents, Logan went to live with his uncle up in Alberta, Canada, who then also lost his life to poachers. So yes, this is still as dark as both Bruce and Logan's backstories. He then went to kick it with some nuns and then joined up with the Canadian Air Force. Now after this, at some point, he joined the Weapon X program and learned of his mutation and gained his claws alongside his incredibly dangerous rival, Creed H. Quinn, who would become a saber-toothed Joker hybrid named Hyena. Logan Wayne would go back to New Gotham City, where he decided to avenge his parents' and uncle's deaths by donning the costume and name of Dark Claw. Number 9. Sideburns. When Galactica, the daughter of Galactus, is looking for her next meal in issue 1 of her self-titled comic, she finds Earth, a lovely little morsel of a planet teeming with scrumptious life. But while looking at her dinner, she happens to notice Wolverine, a mutant who can seemingly regenerate from anything. I mean, there's also Deadpool, but whatever. Realizing his mutant regenerative abilities, she formulates an idea of using a bit of his harvested DNA with a bit of celestial power to create Sideburns, the regenerating planet. A planet-sized Wolverine that would grow back after each meal, giving the World Devourer billions and billions of years of meals. Unfortunately, she just as quickly realizes that a planet made up of Canadian mutant DNA like this, prone to drinking beer over anything else, and with predilection to being feral, would be highly unstable. Unfortunate, because I'd love to see this guy floating around through the galaxy. Number 8. House of M. Wolverine. Now to be clear, technically this version of Wolverine is just regular old 616 Wolverine, since unlike other characters in this Scarlet Witch created reality, Wolverine retains all of his old memories, which gives him a distinct advantage in this world. But outside Alongside of his story-serving memories, before he regains those memories, this Wolverine was a member of Magneto's Red Guard, which saw him have additional training as a SHIELD operative, adding extra skill to a character who was hard to even scratch on a villain's best day. Also, in this reality, Logan has himself a little relationship with Mystique, unlike his alternates who seem to always be pining after Jean Grey. Is this an advantage over regular Wolverine? Depends on your taste. Number 7. Vampire Wolverine. In What If number 24, thanks to his healing factor, Wolverine is actually immune to being turned into a vampire from just a regular old bite, which allows him to be the best one suited to bring down the threat of vampires themselves. But when he finally takes down Dracula, he actually decides to have a little snack on the dead vampire, which does turn the mutant into not just a vampire, but the new vampire king. The fact that Vampire Wolverine is a vampire means that his strength and speed are enhanced to vampiric levels. On top of that, he has an evil personality that is fueled by the character's desire to drain the blood of the living. Now couple that with his already somewhat feral personality, his healing factor, adamantium skeleton, and the vampire trait of immortality, and he is very dangerous compared to the usual Wolverine. Number 6. Ultimate Wolverine. I'm gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear explosion. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men. Although, it may have only been just because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30 years old, which is a little uncomfortable.
Number 5. Jean Grey, Earth 7642. This alternate version of Jean comes to us from a Marvel and DC crossover universe assigned the number Earth 7642. In fact, after her initial appearance, Jean from this universe would also appear in stories pertaining to her past in a crossover with the Wildcats, who were over at Image at the time. So just all the crossovers really. In this reality, Jean does become the Dark Phoenix, wipes out a star, and then takes her own life, much like in the main continuity version of the story. But instead of that not being the real Jean and learning that she was actually alive but hidden underwater, in this universe, Jean is resurrected by Darkseid, who intends to use her in his pursuit of the anti-life equation. The Teen Titans and the X-Men team up to defeat Darkseid and Jean, who then recovers her memory of her life before she was Dark Phoenix and turns on Darkseid, once more sacrificing herself to save everyone else. Ain't that just the way? Number 4. Apocalypse. In Age of Apocalypse, in the reality of Earth 295, Jean ends up eventually taking on the mantle of Apocalypse. While she perished in this reality shortly after that happened, it's basically because she sacrificed herself in order to protect other people. As I said, that always happens. Jean Grey was so powerful as Apocalypse that she even managed to hold on to her own personality, but she could feel that influence of her new role working to change her, as she expressed that she did feel intensely arrogant, which might also be why she was cool going out the way that she did in the end. Because, you know, I feel like Jean wouldn't want to be fully taken over by that force. Number 3. God Level Phoenix. This version of Jean comes to us from one of the short stories featured in X-Men Millennial Visions 2000. In the story by the Maker, we learn that Jean is one of the few to survive both Deathbird and Magneto's attack. Unable to stand against them as they are, the X-Men turn to a device Forge created to evolve them further, giving them basically godlike abilities, or raising their abilities to become godlike, perhaps I should say. Jean, as her power-up, gains full and complete control over the Phoenix, making her more powerful than ever before. Definitely not a hero you'd want to go up against, though I honestly wouldn't want to go up against Rogue either in this reality, who you just need to be within a mile of to have your powers and life energy drained, which sounds pretty scary, at least if she has any skin exposed. Number 2. Zorn. While she might not have gone dark or taken the powers of Apocalypse, Jean as Zorn from the alternate reality of Earth 13729 is just all around one of the most powerful Jeans in the multiverse, in my humble opinion. Her powers are like her main counterpart but improved, making her one of the strongest all-around alternates out there. Of course, even then, like most alternate versions of Jean, and even main Jean, Zorn still perished in the end. In X-Men Battle of the Atom issue number 2, we learn that Jean's powers are so great that not even she can apparently handle them, and during the all-out brawl with all the other X-Men and alternate X-Men, she overloads and ends up exploding, creating a massive explosion explosion all around her and leaving nothing left of her own corpse except for her Zorn mask. Number 1. Phoenix/Dark Phoenix. I really wanted to make Zorn my number 1 most powerful alternate gene, but then I remembered that technically both Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix personas we saw in the comics were not really Jean in the main continuity, which would make Phoenix an alternate as well, albeit a one who we thought at the time was the main Jean and who existed in the main continuity still, living in effect as Jean. Dark Phoenix was powerful enough to destroy a whole planet and the whole Dabari race, which I believe amounted to, I think, billions of lives lost. Later, after sacrificing herself to save everyone from her own darkness, it was revealed that Dark Phoenix wasn't really Jean, but in fact a Jean duplicate created by the Phoenix Force, which used Jean's body and mind as blueprints to create a more powerful version of her while she rested safely beneath Jamaica Bay. So Phoenix and Dark Phoenix both are Jean, but at the same time aren't, which would classify Phoenix as an alternate version technically, and definitely one of the most powerful alternates out there as such. In fact, the creation of that retcon is pretty cool because apparently that retcon had to be created because they wanted to, if they were gonna bring Jean back, make her not guilty for any of the bad stuff she did as Dark Phoenix. So they basically had to make it so that that Jean wasn't the real Jean, which is pretty wild. Number 10. Crusader. Crusader is the daughter of X-Men team member Rogue and Avenger Captain America. I know, a weird combination. But in the reality of Earth 9811, these two ended up together after the heroes and villains on Battleworld decided to call a truce. Remaining there, they settled down and raised families, putting their differences aside. I'm not sure how their relationship worked with Rogue not really being able to touch people and all at this point, or how she had a child considering that, but perhaps, like on Earth 616, she eventually was able to work through the trauma causing this side effect of her powers. Or perhaps the Captain America of Earth 9811 was immune to her involuntary energy and power draining effects. Either way, Sarah is their daughter. She gets much of her power from her mother, or rather she gets much of her power from the power her mother had absorbed in her day, meaning that Sarah is super strong, durable, and can fly. She is also considered worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer and wields her father's shield. Number 9. Wolverine. I really wanted to put Laura Kinney higher up on this list because, well, I love her so much, but unfortunately the psionics are just always pushing some of my favorite and most powerful characters further down on these lists. Those psionics. Oh well. Laura Kinney as X-23 and now Wolverine is still one of the most powerful children of the X-Men around. Some argue that she is more clone, while others argue that she is more biological offspring of Logan, but in reality, she's kind of a bit of both. She was created as a female clone of Wolverine after his genetic material was combined with that of her creator, scientist Sarah Kinney. Sarah noticed that there were damage spots basically in the samples of Logan's genetic material that they had, which was why their cloning process had been unsuccessful up to this point. And so she used her own genetic material to patch those rough spots, which made Laura a female clone. Sarah was forced to carry Laura to term as a surrogate by her jealous colleague Xander Rice, as punishment for even creating the female clone to begin with, a strategy that admittedly had not been approved. Laura has powers similar to her father. She has a regenerative healing factor and was also trained from birth to be a skilled fighter, bodyguard, and assassin. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about more children of the X-Men, there are a lot out there in the multiverse. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality of 13729. Yeah, sadly Storm and T'Challa have never had a child together in the main continuity. I know, it's a bit of a bummer. Unless they had like a real secret child that we just don't know about yet, but I doubt it. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm, that she's a skilled combatant as well. As while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she is also an extremely skilled fighter. And if she's Black Panther's daughter, then she should definitely be a skilled fighter. I mean, you got two amazing parents that are both amazing fighters, so just saying. Number 7. Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the son of Charles Xavier and Mystique, if you can believe that. I know, it's pretty shocking. Charles Xavier II was technically born into the reality of Earth 616, where we later find out that while Mystique actually took the form of Moira when giving birth, Charles actually knew that he was in a relationship with Raven, so it wasn't like a trick of hers. They were actually just wanted to be together, I guess. This version of Charles, however, is an all grown up one from the alternate future of Earth 13729. When his powers first manifested, he accidentally killed his adoptive mother and ended up later joining forces with his half-brother Raze, another child of Mystique weeks, sired by Wolverine, another child of the X-Men. Charles Xavier II has a brilliant and conniving mind, and like his father, is an immensely gifted telepath, capable of using his powers to bend others to his will. Number 6. Polaris. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto, and while you might not think of Magneto as being an X-Men, considering, he started out as an X-Men villain, he has also worked with the team before and even served as a member himself. Heck, at one point he was in charge of the whole New Mutants crew, let's not forget that. Magneto may have some questionable methods when it comes to getting justice that put him on the spectrum of villain, but I think at the end of the day, he's just trying to do what's best for mutants. Or at least what he thinks is best for mutant kind. Polaris, like her father, also has magnetic-based powers, which, like her father, are also pretty impressive. Polaris is considered an alpha-level mutant and recently got to join the X-Men team herself after being elected to join them in the Krakoan X-Men elections. Psychic elections. Imagine if we could all just vote psychically. That would be awesome. That would be so much easier. You would just like sit down and you'd be like, who do I want to vote for? Done.
Number 5. X-Apes. The X-Men are monkeys, or rather apes. This, funnily enough, spawned off of the Marvel Zombies universe and event. Basically, they're trying anything. That event was just so popular. This did not turn out to be quite the hit that was, but I mean, few things can. But this universe still has its fans. Actually, everybody in this universe are apes or monkeys or animals of some kind. So really, if you enjoy this concept, it's just the whole universe, and you have people like the Ape Avengers and Dr. Octopus. It's made for a certain type of pun-loving individual. It's a bit niche, but for some it sparks joy. Number 4. Which breed? For this we have to go for Neil Gaiman of Sandman fame's 1602 Marvel Comics contribution. It is also an alternate universe story. In this universe, the Marvel universe is all happening by Elizabethan times, 1602. There, mutants exist, but they are known as witch breed. This is because they are thought to be the spawn of demons or witches. Or both. They are creatures to be hunted down, but they find safe haven in Xavier's select college for sons of gentlefolk, a school that causes great concern for Sir Nicholas Fury because he sees the potential of all these students as soldiers, which, let's not lie, that's part of what Xavier is doing. Again, this is a universe where people tend to like the whole thing, but the X-Men stand out as a distinct part, or rather, the witch breed. Number 3. X-Babies. Versions of your favorite characters as babies or kids. This is a concept that is either really fun or incredibly lame, depending upon who you're talking to. So the X-Babies are clones created by Mojo in the Mojoverse. This was probably inspired by an even earlier story where he had just taken the X-Men and turned them into kids, again for entertainment. Because if anything goes on long enough, be it show, series, whatever, you're gonna get two things. You're gonna get a child episode and you're gonna get a musical episode. Now the X-Babies are a concept that is short-lived, but they are usually returned to. There is even an A-Babies versus X-Babies. Again, how cool you'll find these tots depends upon your tolerance for baby-related shenanigans. Number 2, Earth X. The version of the X-Men here are depressing, but all of Earth X is depressing actually. After an experiment of Reed Richards goes wrong, or seemingly that's what happened, for once it's not Reed's fault, I know, shock and awe, a population of superpowered beings is produced all over the Earth, and the world drastically alters. To quote The Incredibles, when everyone's super, no one is. Suddenly there's not as much of a reason to hate and fear the X-Men, and they've largely fallen apart. The one character people tend to remember the most that sticks out when they first think of this is Wolverine, who's got a beer gut and is married to Jean Grey, except it's not Jean, it's Madeline Pryor, but he keeps calling her Jean, and it's just sad. Now, how exactly is this cooler, you may be asking? Well, it's all in the depiction. It's unique, it's memorable, and part of a well-received work. So for many, that's what makes it cool. And finally, in at number 1, Vampire Wolverine. Wolverine, Lord of the Vampires. If you thought people loved Vampire Storm, then you know that they enjoy Vampire Wolverine. Wolverine has been a vampire more than once. You have what-if stories like the aforementioned Wolverine, Lord of the Vampires. But you also have arcs like Curse of the Mutants, which would also be the arc that left Jubilee as a vampire for a bit. Many have fond memories of the What If story, where upon successfully turning Storm, Dracula then turns all the rest of the X-Men. Only because of Wolverine's healing factor, he figures out how to use his powers way faster than everybody else, and so he dethrones Dracula and takes over as leader of the vampires. In fact, he leads the new vampire X-Men to take over New York. It's up to the bizarre combination of Doctor Strange and the Punisher to take him down.
Number 10. Armor. Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki, is actually a pretty powerful X-Men, even in the 616 universe, who can create a psionic exoskeleton suit of armor. This exoskeleton is incredibly strong, durable, impenetrable, and it's fueled by energy from Hisako's ancestors in the 616 universe. But not in the Ultimate Universe, no sir. In this universe, Armor's exoskeleton takes the shape of giant animals and even dragons sometimes. Oh, and also in 1610, her exoskeleton is fueled by 10,000 mythological Japanese spirit demons. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Armor is cool and powerful enough that when the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, she was able to slip her way into the 616 Prime Universe, until she was kidnapped by Miss Sinister and eventually lost her life in X-Men Blue number 28 in 2018. Number 9. Firestar. Honestly, Firestar is one of those flame-wielding mutants that kind of flies over my head a lot of the time. Usually I think of Pyro, but in the Ultimate Universe, Pyro is actually not resistant to his own flames and therefore is covered in scar tissue and has like no nerve endings. But Firestar, in both 616 and the Ultimate Universe, is way cooler. Or I guess technically hotter, because fire. Ironically, her character actually had a huge phobia and hate of mutants, until her powers of microwave energy manipulation manifested, which seems to actually take the form of pyrokinesis in this universe. Her whole body can engulf in flames that she is thankfully resistant to. It allows her to fly and surprisingly burn things and people. Like when the super creepy Ultimate Wolverine tried to hit on her and she threatened to burn his nipples off. Number 8. It's Wolverine. I'm gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his Prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear bomb. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men, although it may have also been because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30. Number 7. Psylocke. Colonel Betsy Braddock of Strike is England's most powerful telepath, capable of reading minds, creating psychic grenades that explode in the minds of others, and one of her coolest powers, brandishing a purple psychic energy blade. She was once possessed by the mutant David Xavier, but she was strong enough to overpower him momentarily, which, if you know anything about him and his level of power, is not something to scoff at. When Colossus dropped a car on her, her consciousness was powerful enough to jump into the body of a coma patient named Quanon, kind of calling back to how Betsy and Quanon share a connection in the main 616 universe. Number 6. Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. Now, in the Ultimate Universe, it turns out doing this on a mutant to the point of hitting the end of the line will actually permanently transfer those powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. The first time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities, plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. She would use those abilities to help the X-Men.
Number 5. The Brotherhood of Evil X-Men from the Future. So this team isn't really a straight up alternate X-Men team, as the name implies. I'm cheating just a little bit here. However, they did pose as the true future X-Men when they showed up in Battle of the Atom. And I really like them, so I'm just gonna count them, because I do the lists, so I get to decide what folks we include. Cool? Cool. This team also has some of my favorite overall members, with Charles Xavier II appearing as the leader, and also boasting of a roster including and formerly including Zorn Jean Grey, an Ice Hulk version of Bobby Drake, an insane version of Beast, Raze, Deadpool, and a much more powerful Molly Hayes, who doesn't succumb to exhaustion after using her super strength. Which is pretty scary, because Molly Hayes is pretty strong. Number 4. The Dark X-Men. The Dark X-Men is Norman Osborn's team of mutants who were brought together in response to unrest in the mutant community during the events of Dark Reign. Honestly, I feel like between number 5 on this list and number 4, it really could have gone either way, so let me know if you feel like, the future fake X-Men should have gone above, because I was very on the fence about this. Initially, Norman Osborn was not allowed to get involved with the mutants, but after riots broke out, he was able to finally make his own X-Men team, which he declared to the public was the real X-Men team, declaring the real X-Men team outlaws. Fortunately, it turned out both the team leader Emma Frost and Namor the Submariner, who, when pitted against the true X-Men, turned on their own dark X-Men teammates. I didn't even talk about the other people on this roster, but there were lots of cool people. Number 3. Extreme X-Men. Extreme X-Men Volume 2 is an X-Men series and a team that takes a page out of the Exiles book. Not to be confused with Chris Claremont's Extreme X-Men roster led by Storm in Volume 1 of that series. This version, written by Greg Pak, is a multiversal team of heroes who hail from various alternate realities. Seriously, I love this series. It's 1, really pretty, and 2, it's just really cool. The team is typically led by the main continuity Dazzler, Allison Blair. The team roster included such amazing members as Sage, Earth 12025 Hercules, boyfriend of the James Howlett of that reality, the James Howlett from Earth 12025 himself, Emmeline Frost Summers, an OP godlike immortal version of Emma Frost who is married to Scott in her reality of Earth 52012, Corporal Scott Summers from the American Civil War reality of Earth 70213, a younger version of Kurt nicknamed Kid Nightcrawler, and a floating Xavier head. So many great people. Number 2. Age of Apocalypse. I would say the Age of Apocalypse version of the X-Men has to be one of the toughest versions out there, which shouldn't come as a surprise as, like eventually happened on Earth Z, Magneto also kinda ended up becoming their leader after the death of Xavier. Although in the Age of Apocalypse reality of Earth 295, many things are different. Rogue and Magneto end up getting kinda married, with another kind of odd relationship developing between Storm and Quicksilver that also kinda makes sense given this reality, and Cyclops ends up working for Apocalypse, who rules the world. Another major difference is that in this reality, Charles was actually killed before he could ever form the X-Men, meaning that Magneto was their one true leader here. Number 1. Future X-Men. Personally, I think the future X-Men that we meet in Battle of the Atom, the real future X-Men of Earth 13729 that is, are pretty nuts. I mean, they have Widget on their team. Widget! And they also have a wizard version of Iceman who goes by the name Ice Wizard now, and Wiccan as one of their members as well. I don't know about you, but it doesn't really sound like it gets better than that. Jubilee also takes up the mantle of Wolverine in this reality, which is adorable, and Logan goes on to become the new professor, being known as Professor Logan, which I love.
Number 10. X-Men 1602. You know I gotta talk about this Neil Gaiman and Marvel collaboration yet again. One of the central conflicts within Marvel's 1602 story is the subject of witch breed, in other words, mutants. This story takes the adversity that the regular X-Men face in modern times and amplifies it to about 10, having the mutants be the main victims of this timeline's Spanish Inquisition. Mutants are hunted down and treated in the most horrible medieval ways. Standing against this horrible treatment were a version of the X-Men led by Carlos Javier, or this Earth's King Charles I, who refers to them as Mutantur, or Changing Ones. The team was made up of Warner, aka the Angel, Henry Hal McCoy, Brother Petros and Sister Wanda, Scotius Summerisle, Roberto Trefusis, and the wee apprentice John Grey. Now, this may be a basic team of X-Men, but all of these characters are very powerful in their own right, and in an Elizabethan world that can barely even comprehend them, with limited technology to even oppose them, they're even more powerful in retrospective.
Number 9. Giant Size Little, or Earth 71912. Formerly known editorially as the X-Babies, the X-Men of Earth 71912 are an alternate multiversal version of the X-Men as created by Scotty Young and Guri Hiro. Young's take on the Marvel Universe generally sees famous teams reinvented as little kids, like in his original take on Avengers vs. X-Men, where baby teams of Avengers and X-Men fight one another over a teddy bear named Bucky Bear. While they were once babies, this X-Men team has seemingly grown up a little bit at least, appearing as young children now. We also see this version of the X-Men and various mutant heroes and villains appearing in the Infinity comic written by Scotty Young, Giant Sized Little Marvels, with art by Dax Gordine. While this team is technically just kids, that doesn't mean they aren't capable of making powerful moves. It just means that their world is governed by more kid-like and kid-friendly rules and confines. However, I have no doubt that the giant-sized little X-Men could still kick butt in other universes as well, should they need to. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, please head on over to Facebook, where you can also show us some love by clicking that like and clicking that follow and all of the Facebook stuff.
Number 8. X-Men 2099. As the fourth incarnation of the X-Men in this universe, with basically no connection to classic characters or plot threads other than being inspired by the ideas of Charles Xavier, the nature of the 2099 X-Men team, created by John Francis Moore and Ron Lim, first appearing in X-Men 2099 #1 in August of 1993, makes them one of the most creative and interesting versions of the team ever. The team comes together at the end of the 21st century, led by Desert Ghost, who has the ability to break down molecular structure with his left hand and heal even lost limbs with his right hand. He had a vision for a new future for mutant kind, and his team is made up of completely new characters like Cerebra, who has the abilities of Cerebro basically, and the ability to manipulate a person's nervous system, or Skullfire, who had ambient energy particle absorption. All the members of this X-Men team have unique powers to take on the grim corporate-ruled future of this timeline.
Number 7. Marauders. Marauders has to be one of my favorite X teams we've had in a long time. They weren't always so amazing and heroic though. The Marauders was initially a name taken by Mr. Sinister's band of mutants, who were pretty evil. The same mutants behind the Mutant Massacre, where many Morlocks were killed, and Angel, one of the original X-Men, got properly messed up. Poor Angel. Recently though, the Marauders' name was reclaimed by Kitty Pryde, now known as Captain Kate Pryde, the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Queen. Kate leads her Marauders team in an effort to fight mutant injustices the world over. Where there are mutants who are being kept from Krakoa or oppressed, her and the Marauders fight to free them. They also operate in trades, making deliveries the world over to ensure Krakoan-based goods and products like medicine and whiskey are delivered to Krakoa's trade partners.
Number 6. Asgardian X-Men. In What If number 12 from 1990, we get a little taste of what would happen if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard after their adventure during the Asgardian Wars in X-Men Annual number 9. Cyclops puts the X-Men to a vote, with the winning majority deciding whether to stay in or leave Asgard. Now Loki sent the losing majority home to Earth while allowing the winning majority to stay in Asgard. The result is an Asgardian X-Men squad that disperses among the Asgardian society, and it is so cool. Nightcrawler becomes a member of the New Warriors 3, or I guess 4. Sunspot becomes an Asgardian warrior, Danny Moonstar becomes a member of the Valkyrie, Ilyana Rasputin becomes the Enchantress, and above all of that and more, Storm becomes the Goddess of Thunder, with a version of Mjolnir becoming one of the most powerful versions of Thor in the comics ever. The X-Men becoming gods of Asgard with all the support of the already existing gods? Helheim, yes. Sorry, that's a bad joke, sorry.
Number 5. Xandra Naramani. Xandra is Professor X's daughter, who is created out of his genetic material and that of his lover's genetic material, the Shi'ar Magistrix Lilandra Naramani, after both of them were believed dead. As such, Xandra grew up to become Shi'ar royalty and also spent a good amount of her life hunted because of this, with various parties attempting to use her for their own means. Xandra is an extremely gifted telepath. She can manipulate others' minds, read minds, and can create hyper-realistic telepathic illusions. Number 4. Ruby Summers. She was the X-offspring used in our oh-so-clickable thumb for the part 1 to this list, and although she was on my extended list for that part 1, my long brainstorm that I came up with, I didn't get around to talking about her because I kind of reached a point where there were too many Summers children on that list, and I was like, I don't want to make this a top 10 children of Cyclops. We got that list, and also that's not what this list is. What can I say? Sykes got strong genes. That's why Mr. Sinister is so obsessed after all and is known as the #1 fan of the Summers Club. Scott Summers is Ruby's dad in the alternate reality she hails from, and Emma Frost is her mother. This makes Ruby fairly powerful, not at the level of Hope or X-Man, but still pretty impressive. She's also super cool looking, which is an added bonus. Ruby hails from the alternate Earth of 1191, the home reality of famous X-Men ally Bishop. Ruby is also capable of emitting optic blasts like her dad and his brothers, but she has more control over when and how she emits these blasts. Unlike her dad, who's like, I literally need a visor. Ruby also comes with her ruby form, which, like her mother's diamond form, grants her invulnerability and pretty much immortality. Number 3. Olivier Raven. Olivier Raven is legally known as Olivier Lebeau and is one of the alternate reality children of Gambit and Rogue. Honestly, I feel like there are not enough of these kids out in the multiverse. I don't know if that's just me. For a couple as famous as Gambit and Rogue, I mean, you would think that we'd have a lot more kids from them, at least through the multiverse. Though admittedly, I'm not quite sure that Rogue and Gambit are really the kid-having type, at least from what I've seen in the main continuity. They seem pretty content with just having their fur babies right now. So maybe they just aren't super into having kids as a family. Olivier hails from the reality of Earth 41001, the reality of Gen Next, a group Ollie is part of. He has powers similar to his mother's, except he has better control over them and is able to choose when and how much power, life energy, and memories he absorbs via physical contact, or doesn't absorb in cases where he just, wants to make physical contact without using his powers. He can also absorb powers on a more permanent level, although he has less control, it seems, over when this happens. Like his father, he also seems to have some charm-based powers. Either that, or he's just charming. Number 2. Proteus. Proteus is the son of Moira McTaggart, who before I would count more as like an ex-ally, but with recent revelations, we can definitely consider her a member in the same way we might consider someone like Charles Xavier. It turns out that Moira herself was a mutant this whole time, possessing unique reincarnation powers. She has also been known for being a leader and teacher of X-Men groups before, including the time when she led a team that Professor X then recruited, sending them into Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. Not Krakoa as we know it now, but Krakoa as it was back in the day when it was like a monster island. Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, son of Joseph and Moira McTaggart. He is currently one of the 5 on Krakoa, and his powers as part of that team are mainly used to warp reality, allowing the non-viable eggs that Egg, formerly known as Gold Balls, produces to become viable for life. These eggs are then used to grow new versions of fallen mutants. Proteus is an Omega level mutant who requires hosts to survive. Initially, Kevin had a body, but now he's basically just pure energy. The hosts he controls and feeds off of eventually are exhausted and killed by that energy drain, making him not just a powerful psionic mutant, but also a powerful energy vampire as well, unintentionally. Number 1. Legion. Legion is the son of Professor Charles Xavier that was conceived when he had a love affair with Gabrielle Haller, which is where Legion gets his legal last name, as his given name is David Haller. Legion is so powerful because he suffers from a severe dissociative identity disorder, where he has more than 100 personas residing within him. Each persona has a number, many have names, and they each have their own specific power set that show up whenever they take over. Because of this, there is almost nothing that Legion isn't capable of. He can manipulate matter and time. We've seen him time travel and completely warp reality as a result of his possible abilities. He also has some pretty powerful hair, which I gotta say, I'm happy that he still rocks even now in the current modern day comics. He's still got that sweet hair. So tall.
Number 10. Bloodstorm. Now, Storm is already mistress of the elements, so quite powerful and quite interesting. But what happens when she becomes a vampire? Now, this has happened briefly in main continuity, but in the Mutant X universe, it became a permanent change. The Mutant X comic series was published from 1998 to 2001, and as mentioned, it saw a very different Storm. This was after she was bitten by Dracula. Here, she was not saved, but instead became a full-fledged creature of the night. She of course had vows not to kill, so she had the vampire dilemma, which she solved by hiring some of her former teammates to let her drink from them, like Kitty Pryde. She would eventually leave the X-Men and join a team called the Six. She also turns Gambit into a vampire, even though she warns him he'll regret it, and he does. Spoilers. Listen when people warn you. Bloodstorm became a breakout character of this series. Number 9. New Sun Gambit. Speaking of Gambit, let's take a look at one of his alternate versions. This is New Sun Gambit, and he hails from Earth 9921. Gambit actually has enormous power potential that was quashed by Mr. Sinister in the main continuity, but that continuity is not all. In this other universe, he was trained to use his abilities even before he had them, and then when this was combined with his full potential and a mystic ceremony, he became something else altogether. The only thing is, the awakening of all these abilities would create a shockwave that would destroy his Earth, forcing him to travel around, and of course he ended up on the 616 Earth, where he ended up befriending Gambit and trying to help him along his way, but didn't tell him who he was. It was after his reveal and Gambit's subsequent disgust that he changed his name to New Sun. Some fans like seeing the full unleashed potential on display of Gambit. Number 8. Basilisk. Not all alternate versions that people like have happy outcomes. Case in point, Basilisk from Earth 11326, an Earth also known as Age of X. Here, Cyclops was incarcerated in a mutants-only facility after the manifestation of his powers as a teenager killed several people, including his parents. He captured the attention of the prison warden Arcade because of his power set, so he made him this very special mask. It looks a lot like the Skull mask from Persona 5, and it's something that people like about this character. In fact, for many, it's what makes him cooler. It is a very menacing looking mask. Now, a lot of this universe had to do with Legion, one of its personalities, and manifesting another world. So for some, it was just a cool concept in general. The mask looked great. Love the mask. Number 7, Soldier Supreme. Here we have an amalgamated character from Warp World. This was the universe that was created when Gamora had the Infinity Gauntlet, put everybody's souls into the Soul Gem, and then folded that universe in half. As a result of this, the characters were merged and fused together. So you have Marvel characters smushed, and one of those was Captain America, Steve Rogers, and Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange. So I mean, they kind of already had the same name, just spelled differently, so it made it a bit easier. Back there, Dr. Stephen Rogers, but now with a PH. Their stories actually don't fuse too badly. It's World War II, and Stephen Rogers is contracted for a super secret soldier experiment, only it turns out it's a cover for a mystical ceremony instead of for, you know, the scientific one that he actually undergoes. But these mystic rituals still end up enhancing his strength and allowing him to connect with the occult, and he becomes Soldier Supreme. So he has Cap's cowl, but he still has like a mustache. And he was actually one of the heroes who objected to Warp World being completely destroyed at the end of the arc by Adam Warlock. So Warlock found a way to let it still exist and let these characters still exist. It was one of those loopholes. Stephen Rogers did that and kept being a hero. Number 6, Old Man Logan. Would any of our nerd lists be complete without mentioning Old Man Logan? Yes they would, but it just keeps coming up. It's a staple here on Top 10 Nerd. Well, this story is one of the most popular alternate universe stories out there, and it has a famously gross confrontation between the Hulk and Wolverine, or Logan, because he's not Wolverine anymore in this story. Here we have a grizzled old man Logan fighting his way across a supervillain-controlled America, trying to keep his claws sheathed after what he did, which, spoilers, was somehow managing to kill most of the X-Men. This was because he fell for an illusion created by Mysterio. This is a must-read for many fans and a fave Wolverine story for others.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel universe, and when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.
Number 10. What If? Since Disney's What If drops in mere weeks, we have to kick off the list with Volume 2, Issue 74, titled What If Mr. Sinister Formed the X-Men. In this What If, we find Cyclops and Havoc being raised by Mr. Sinister himself. What a happy, healthy home to grow up in. So Scott was leading this team of what he thought was heroes. The team consisted of himself, Havoc, Sabretooth, Madeline Pryor, and Sauron. So they of course ran into the X-Men, the current team being led by Marvel Girl, who Scott was immediately attracted to, page 15 and 16. Cyclops feels like he's known her his whole life at this point. He feels the connection and it changes his entire outlook on mutants. He only feels warmth and concern with her. But Mr. Sinister said they were traitors. How can this be? Maybe the guy named Mr. Sinister lied to Scott. Number 9. Mr. S. The alternate future of Earth X shows us a world that could go, well, either way. Every human was given superhuman abilities after the Inhumans' Terrigen Mists were released into the atmosphere. So now a team of X-Men just looks like a regular bowling team. They're a team of superheroes in tights in a world where everybody is a superhero. I mean, it just doesn't really look that cool anymore. In this future, Cyclops himself becomes a teacher and leads an entirely new team, because there's of course a handful that ought to be struggling with their new powers like he once did. Scott led this new team until they were an effective unit, and then 3 years later, Scott and his X-Men team joined Mar-Vell in his journey to collect powerful artifacts to kill Death, and then, build a paradise in what used to be the realm of the dead. When Mar-Vell did kill Death, a new problem came to be. Now nobody on Earth could die. Which sounds pretty good, but it was actually really sad and everyone just got old and sick. So Scott would now communicate with the Phoenix Force, who is in the realm of the dead. Ouija board not included. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us out. You're amazing. Now let's get right back into this list. No more wasted time. Number 8. Scotius Summer Isle. Scaling back to the year 1602, the era where if you could do bed mass, you were deemed a witch and then subsequently killed. That era. So superheroes existing back then would surely cause a stir as well. Mutants on this Earth 311 were referred to as witchbreed and were constantly being hunted down. Now when he was first found, his chest was branded with an X. He eventually meets with other heroes, most notably Carlos Javier, who saved his life and then invited him to the school of Witchbreed. And no, I don't mean Hogwarts, the other one. Number 7, House of M. Scott Summers from Earth 58163, also known as the House of M reality. We find Scott in a much better predicament when we first see him in House of M issue 2. So this is a reality where Magneto has now lost the war and his daughter Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch, lost her mind. She couldn't get a grip on her powers or reality for that matter, so Xavier gathers the Avengers and X-Men to figure out a game plan. They get to Genosha to talk to Wanda, but then when they get there, Wanda, Magneto, and Quicksilver are nowhere to be seen. Reality itself has changed. Peter Parker wakes up, and now he's married to Gwen Stacy, who used to be dead, instead of MJ. And then for Scott Summers, well, his life is great in this altered reality. He's happily married to Emma Frost, and they live in a mutant world. Layla Miller came in to break the bad news to Scott that this peaceful family man lifestyle was all Wanda's doing. So Scott was of course on board when it came to getting reality back to normal. Number 6, Scotty Noir. Coming from Earth 90214, the Noir universe, we get a darker take on Cyclops and also more realistic. See, in this universe, Xavier wasn't tapping into the minds of the world's finest, but instead he opened a school that trains sociopaths how to be the best criminals. It's dark and not just in style. I mean, the story alone, Jean Grey's dead body gets washed up onto the shores of Welfare Island, so the X-Men were trying to figure out a murder case. That led to them also discovering the deaths of police officers around the city. Just a grim tale. Now there's no spandex or monologue. Scotty instead wears a suit, a gangster hat, and just a red visor, you know, for the Sin City look. And as for weapons, he carries with him a pair of twin revolvers. A little bit different than our usual 616 Scotty. Number 5, William Rolfson. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Force number 13, William Rolfson, better known as Genocide, is the son of Apocalypse and Autumn Rolfson. She was afraid that Apocalypse would see their affair-born son and look at him as a threat. So Autumn decided to hide and raise William by herself. Not a bad plan. During this time, William had grown into his mutant powers, and even had a bad suit to go along with it, and he was only like 15. The suit is designed to trap him and contain his powers. He kind of looks like a skeleton in a Hulkbuster armor. It's kind of neat, like a Mars Attacks alien. He can generate radioactive plasma, which is a nice touch in a fight. Yeah, you want to go? Hope you like plasma, bucko. Bam! It's also as hot as the sun's core, so it's real good. In the Dark Angel saga, when William and his mom are hiding, Archangel found them. At this time, he was Apocalypse's replacement, so he recruited William. Eventually, William's mom caught on what was going on and gave them hell. Archangel reacted by killing her. What a Number 4, Margaret Slade. So as a little girl, she straight up watched Apocalypse himself fight a gang of demons, literally cutting them up. She gave birth to Hamilton Slade, and then after that, her second son, Frederick Slade, who we'll get into a little bit. She's very stern and ruthless, as one would assume, being a descendant of Apocalypse and all. Like, imagine being a child and witnessing Apocalypse being summoned to fight demons. Like, you wouldn't necessarily be the most bubbly of all teenagers after that. I feel like you'd be a bit scarred. She favorited one of her sons a lot more simply because of the fact that he was violent and ruthless as well as her. They both had the bloodlines of Apocalypse. One was just a bit more different, if I can say that. A pretty notable power that Margaret possessed is that she's able to transform the molecules of her hands into a metallic material that she shaped into talons or claws. Kind of like that dude from the Terminator with the metal swords. These are jazz hands. These are gold. I think it's gold, right? These are gold. These are jazz hands. One of the two. Go watch Bring It On. Number 3, Frederick Slade. Born as the second child of Margaret Slade, making his first appearance in X-Men Apocalypse vs. Dracula issue 2, he's in the bloodline of Apocalypse, and he's too cool not to include. Born in the 18th century, his family was part of the main branch of Clan Akaba. So basically, he was a second-born and was physically smaller, so he didn't really get too much attention from his mom. Middle child syndrome, kinda. Pretty mean. She was actually using her time and energy to mold Hamilton Slade. The family was pretty wealthy and spent most of their time in the Alexandria House, aka the cool treehouse meeting place for Clan Akaba. So Frederick, growing up more or less under the radar, that is until Ozymandias came along and saw new potential in him. Ozymandias spent his time watching the members of Clan Akaba as they betray each other and even kill each other just to get closer to Apocalypse. But Frederick Slade, he was a different egg. Ozymandias saw courage, fairness, and compassion inside of Frederick, so he trained him to become the leader of Akaba, and to be donned the title of the Fittest. What a great nickname that would be. Like, Oh, Frederick. Oh, you mean Frederick the Fittest? Yeah, I know him. He's my boss. So now he's a descendant of Apocalypse, so he of course has a few tricks up his sleeve. Self-molecular manipulation for starters, which most upper-level members of Clan Akaba possess. Also teleportation. But this one is unique to him. Not only can he teleport himself, but he can also teleport objects or people. It makes a cool blink sound when he teleports too. Gotta love the small details. Number 2, Hamilton Slade. Okay, remember that older brother, Frederick, that I mentioned? Yeah, that's Hamilton Slade. He made his first appearance in X-Men Apocalypse vs. Dracula, issue 1. He's a vampire mutant, so no wonder he got all the attention while Frederick sat on the sidelines. He's also got this cool, big clan tattoo right on his chest. Dude's not playing around. We meet him in the Victorian era, born into that same wealthy family. He was born inheriting a strong dose of Apocalypse's blood, so naturally, he was destined to become the leader. It's in his blood, literally. He looked at himself as he would Apocalypse. This guy's a born leader. The members of the clan had to take orders from him if they wanted to or not. He ended up dying at the hands of Dracula, which not a bad way to go out, or not go out. Yeah, he became part of the undead after that and returned as a vampire. As if this guy couldn't get any cooler. So Dracula and his new crew, now including Hamilton Slade, attacked Clan Akaba, killing his own mother in the meantime. And then little bro Frederick Slade came in and killed him. Yeah, he teleported his head away from the rest of his body. Nice touch, super gross. And lastly, number 1, Blink. The great-granddaughter of Margaret Slade, also known as Clarice Ferguson, hello Clarice, was a main player in the Age of Apocalypse storyline. Making her first debut in Uncanny X-Men issue 317, she was one of the many mutants that were captured by the Phalanx. She's known to be rather tense and panicky because of her given powers. Anybody caught in the Blink wave, which is her teleportation field, would just get shredded. Now I don't mean get jacked, they would get shredded apart, their body just poof, gone. She isn't the best at controlling her powers too. And those powers being able to create teleportation warp portals, so she can displace anything and anybody as well, but she also used these portals to throw a weapon back at an enemy. Kinda like in Infinity War during the first New York battle, when Strange and Wong used their portals to throw Ebony Maw's brick darts back at him. It's pretty cool stuff. She joined the mutant nation of Krakoa and battled Nightcrawler, which is a pretty sweet issue.
Number 10, Zombie Dark Phoenix. This version of Jean does have some perks when it comes to power set, but ultimately her downfall is, well, being stuck in the Marvel Zombies universe, where many zombies get taken out by fellow zombie hero Hulk. Here, however, Jean is supposed to possess the Phoenix Force still, which in theory I think should have allowed her to resurrect herself, but maybe that works differently when you get completely punched to smithereens by the Hulk. But I mean literally, she gets punched through the torso and then the Hulk crushes her head with his fist in Marvel Zombies 2 issue 5. It's quite gratuitous because, well, Marvel Zombies. Still, however, in theory, the zombified version of Jean should have been considered one of the most powerful. And overall, for the zombie heroes, even being defeated by the Hulk, she was considered one of the most powerful, running with the Zombie Galacti, aka Power Cosmic Zombies, on Earth 2149 or Earth Z prior to her death. Number 9, Ultimate Jean Grey. Ultimate Jean Grey ended up becoming the leader of Tian, which I think gives her a power boost, but on the other hand, she was not made as powerful as her 616 counterpart when it comes to her abilities, so for that, she gets moved down a peg. While telekinesis was initially Jean's main power set on Earth 616, here in the Ultimate Universe, Jean seemed to primarily be more of a telepath, who also has telekinetic abilities. Jean, as a telepath, can psychically cloak herself or others, but not against stronger telepaths. She can heal trauma or give you trauma by altering your memories. She can give others amnesia too, and use her telepathy to create vivid and realistic illusions. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more lists about Jean Grey, or just more mutant lists in general, because I love doing those, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up, and maybe share it, maybe give it to a friend you think, needs a little Jean Grey in their day. Number 8, Jean Grey, Earth 18119. Earth 18119 is the reality of Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. It was destroyed and then incorporated into Doctor Doom's Battle World, and after the destruction of Battle World, was then completely recreated and incorporated into the multiverse by Mr. Fantastic. On this Earth, Jean's power levels are comparable to her main continuity counterpart, but she also has the added strength of being a mother, which probably makes her both a more determined hero and teacher in this reality. On Earth 18119, Jean ended up breaking up with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, after he lost faith in Professor X's vision, and instead ended up dating and later marrying Wolverine. Together they have a daughter named Kate, whose codename is Shine. fine. And she's super cute. Number 7. Madeline Pryor. A lot of people think of Maddie as being a weaker version of Jean because she's a clone, but I would argue Maddie is either on the same level of Jean or at least has the potential to be at Jean's level or even more powerful. Why? Well, Madeline Pryor might be a clone, but Mr. Sinister also made her using a part of the Phoenix Force, which means that Madeline Pryor is kind of both Jean and the Phoenix Force all in one. She has like built-in Phoenix, which you'd think would make her connection just a touch stronger. Madeline, also known as the Goblin Queen, is also well versed in magic, something Jean hasn't really dipped into herself. I'm not saying she's more powerful than Jean Grey every day of the week, I'm just saying the potential for her to be more powerful here and there definitely exists, at least in my opinion. Number 6. Black Queen. This alternate version of Jean Grey comes to us from Earth 39529, which we get to peer into through 1989's What If series in issue 59. This What If asks the question, what if Wolverine led Alpha Flight? The answer? Well, the fate of Jean Grey would end up really dark. Wolverine becomes the leader of the Alpha Flight team due to the fact that the X-Men were unable to rescue him as their rescue team was killed by the Canadian military. Alpha Flight are the ones sent to rescue Jean after she ends up brainwashed by the Hellfire Club and joins them. Unfortunately, upon arrival, Wolverine learns it is too late as this version of Jean has already gone full Dark Phoenix. Logan has no other choice in this reality but to kill her in order to protect everyone else, basically on planet Earth. I don't know about you, but a completely evil Jean Grey who has gone full Dark Phoenix seems pretty powerful to me. I think Logan got lucky by even being able to kill her. Number 5. Nate Grey. Nate Grey is the son of Scott and Jean, who was raised by Forge, who basically became his foster father. Scott and Jean never really knew of their relation to Nate when he was born, as he was created by Mr. Sinister to be the perfect psionic mutant. Sinister created him using the genetic material of both Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Mr. Sinister just has all that genetic material. Nate did end up becoming the perfect psionic mutant and is known for being one of the most powerful mutants around. At one point, he was even seen as being a mutant Jesus, being known for a time by the mantle of the Second Coming. He has been shown using his powers to heal and even resurrect people on occasion, as well as warp reality. He also is believed to be a potential avatar of the Phoenix Force due to his ties to Jean Grey and his immense power. Nate also has a telepathic link to his alternate reality brother, Nathan Summers. Number 4. Mother Ascani. Mother Ascani is Rachel Summers, but from an alternate timeline. Although Rachel has been explained in the comics as being unique when it comes to kind of her alternates. She doesn't so much have alternate versions of herself, more that there are like different aspects of herself scattered throughout various realities and time, but Rachel is kind of always Rachel. She's both all there is and then kind of so much more than that. It's confusing, but it's also what makes her cool. This version of Rachel came into her own state of being after she sacrificed herself to save Captain Britain. Becoming lost in the time stream, she ended up in an alternate future in the 37th century where Apocalypse had taken over the planet 100 years prior. She developed the clan Ascani and would be the one to give the order for Sister Ascani to help save the prophesied Messiah referred to as Ascani's son or Dayspring, which would end up being her alternate timeline brother, Nathan Summers. So many alternate timeline siblings. Hard to keep track of all this traveling through time and alternate realities. Number 3. Young Cable. Who is this young kid? I thought Cable was an old grizzled man like we saw in Deadpool 2. If that's what you're thinking, well, you're not wrong. But also, you kinda are wrong. There are in essence sorta 2 Cables, but there's only one Nathan Summers. Sort of. I mean, it's complicated. Basically, young Cable is old Cable, but from his own past. Young Cable, however, killed himself, older Cable, and in essence replaced him in the comics. While he's technically the same character just from his own past, he's also kind of a very different person as he's at a different stage in his life. In essence, Cable closed his own time loop when he killed himself, which a lot of people hated as they figured, how would Cable not see that coming? And also, they miss old Cable. But of course, all of that confusion was explained. In essence, old Cable knew it was coming, but he also knew because of his past that it kinda had to happen, so yeah. Confusing. Anyways, young Cable is the current main Cable in the Dawn of X line, who is basically a loudmouth, gun-obsessed, cocky kid who loves a good fight, especially if he gets to protect innocent people along the way, or it makes him look badass in front of the ladies. He has dated a bunch of younger mutants already in the comics, but is currently in a relationship with all 5 of the Cuckoos, much to Emma Frost's displeasure. Just watching you, young Cable. Number 2. Rachel Summers. Rachel has got to be one of the most confusing of the Summers children, one, and I say that fully acknowledging all the confusing stuff that we just talked about, including the stuff with Cable. While there is the version of Rachel Summers that became Mother Ascani, there is also multiple other versions of her besides, especially as her splitting into separate entities is literally a part of sort of Mother Ascani's story. Anyways, this Rachel Summers is from the alternate Earth of 811, and for most people is considered the Rachel Summers, the main one. Here she was born to Jean and Scott after Jean had bonded with the Phoenix Force and ended up living after having the confrontation with the Shi'ar. Rachel didn't just inherit her mother's extraordinary telepathic and telekinetic powers though, she also inherited the Phoenix Force itself, part of which resided within her, allowing her to use its power whenever she needed. She was friends with Franklin Richards and lived peacefully in her reality until the anti-mutant Senator Kelly was killed. This ended up resulting in pandemonium and public panic, which resulted in the death of her mother and her father, as well as an apocalyptic future where all superhuman beings were essentially captured or killed. Rachel's powers allow her to manipulate time and travel through it, which was kinda how she ended up in the reality of Earth 616. Number 1. Old Cable. Or just Cable really, we can just call him Cable. This was the original Cable, a man who was once baby Christopher, the son of Madeline Pryor and Scott Summers, and then grew up to become Nathan Summers. He was infected with the techno-organic virus by Apocalypse, but was later saved by both his adoptive mother, Jean Grey, and his biological father, Scott Summers, with some help from the Inhumans as well. Jean at this point was kinda also like Nathan's mother, and Madeline was out of the picture, having gone insane and become the Goblin Queen after she learned she was a clone of Jean created by Mr. Sinister. Jean was given memories of raising the baby that basically gave her a natural motherly instinct and attachment to the child, although I don't really know why that was necessary. She could have likely raised this baby as her son without needing those memories, but anyways, yes, Jean was also pretty much his mother. After saving the baby, Cyclops and Jean were faced with a hard decision in order to save the baby's life. They decided to send him with Sister Ascani, and they actually would see him again, in the future and the past, and pretty much all throughout and around their timeline and alternate timelines besides. Adult Nathan Summers, Cable, would also at one point become the one responsible for saving his own father's life.
Coming in as the first entry on our list at number 10, we've got to go with Kuin, the teenage alien clone. During a misadventure that saw Wolverine stranded on a planet at the edge of the cosmos, far away from any other X-Men or Avengers, he found himself coming face to face with a young boy that seemed to share his exact power set, including an adamantium skeleton. Named Kuin, this boy is eventually revealed to have been created by an alien race that worships Wolverine and sees him as a missing link needed to create the ultimate being. Unfortunately, it's also implied that the cloning process was imperfect and that the adamantium attached to Kuin's bones might not be able to grow with the rest of his body, leaving this story just as tragic as it is odd. Coming in at number 9, we have Jimmy Hudson, the son of Ultimate Wolverine. In the Ultimate Marvel Universe, things weren't looking too hot. Magneto had gone off the deep end and murdered a large portion of both the world population and the entirety of the X-Men, even killing Wolverine with a blast powerful enough to rip the adamantium off his bones. Following this universe-changing event, a young boy named Jimmy Hudson was gifted a post-death holographic message from Wolverine revealing himself to be the kid's father. With the same healing factor and claws as his dad, along with the ability to change what substance his claws are actually made of, Jimmy Hudson was an ideal candidate as the X-Men looked to reform after the death of so many members. Coming in at number 8, we've got to go with Torrent. On the alternate world of Earth 9811, the planet was never reverted back from being a patchwork of different realities named Battleworld, and led to many superheroes deciding to settle down on this new plane of existence. Born to Wolverine and Storm, Torrent was a hot-tempered young mutant who possessed both the power to manipulate the weather and heal back from any injury, an incredibly powerful combo that meant she had little to fear when summoning some trademark lightning. Joining a new team of X-Men determined to wipe the robotic Sentinels off their new home, Torrent is definitely a mutant you do not want to mess with. Coming in at number 7, we have Saberclaw. Hailing from Earth 98-2, this son of Wolverine and an unknown woman absolutely hates his father. So much so that it seems to have literally changed him into appearing more reminiscent of Sabretooth than his actual dad. Wearing adamantium sheaths on his bone claws to make them even deadlier, Saberclaw was briefly a member of this universe's Sinister Six before eventually being convinced to put his differences aside with his father and help defend the world from the threat of Galactus and the daughter of Loki. Just another day in the wonderful world of weird comic book family dynamics. Coming in at number 6, we've got to go with Wild Thing. Hailing from the same universe as her half-brother Saberclaw, this daughter of Wolverine and the ninja Elektra has managed to stay on the side of good and become a teenage superhero that would be notable even without famous parents. With increased speed, strength, and the ability to create claws out of pure psychic energy, Wild Thing is an incredibly powerful mutant that showcases the best influences of the X-Men and proves that even when the first generation is ready to retire, there'll always be an angry clawed mutant ready to protect the X-Men name.
Number 5. German Nightcrawler. In Marvel's Excalibur, published in 1989, we meet a version of Nightcrawler from a universe where, in World War II, the German forces were victorious. In this world, Nightcrawler is a member of the super team Lightning Force. He once squared off against the normal Nightcrawler from the Marvel Prime universe, Earth 616, teleporting him around multiple times and then mocking him after he passed out, calling him an inferior specimen. This version of Nightcrawler has longer, sharper nails and a sharp outfit to match. He's even got a sweet pair of shades like any dark version of a character should. Number 4. The Demon. Appearing in X-Men Noir, Mark of Cain, this Nightcrawler is a dark one indeed. Recruited by a German government agency known as Weapon X, he was put to work kidnapping an American spy known as the Mimic in exchange for his freedom. Also known as the Demon, he tends to speak in sermons like a priest and wears a super creepy devil mask to hide his hideous burnt face. Coming from X-Men Noir, it's no surprise that this version of Nightcrawler is so dark. And if you like this list, I definitely recommend checking out X-Men Noir for yourself. And I definitely recommend hitting like on this video. Number 3. Zombie Nightcrawler. First appearing in Marvel Apes Primate Special, this version of Nightcrawler is, well, a zombie. In the Primate Special, there's a whole universe full of hilarious alternate versions of Marvel heroes that are apes, with names like Spider Monkey and the Silverback Surfer. In Volume 1, we see Tony Stark and the Hulk have similar visions in which they see the ape world invaded by zombie versions of Marvel characters, including a crazed looking zombie Nightcrawler seen attacking an ape version of the Scarlet Witch. It's bizarre and it's dark. Number 2. House of M. First appearing in Marvel's House of M event, this Nightcrawler grew up in hiding with his mother Mystique, later becoming a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Magneto's mutant-run world. Later, he joins Wolverine's special team known as the Red Guard, and he has a pretty lengthy character arc that sort of mirrors the Prime Universe Nightcrawler in some interesting ways. Regardless, he eventually finds himself banished to the Deadlands and is eventually killed by a group of zombies, meeting a surprisingly dark end. And now, number 1, Banff Dragon. In Marvel's Inferno, released in 2015, we meet what is possibly the darkest version of Nightcrawler yet. His mother was a shape-shifting villain, and his father was a half-demon. Fighting alongside Cyclops and Colossus, Nightcrawler regularly helps a team teleport to the Inferno, also known as Limbo or Battleworld, in efforts to rescue Colossus' sister Illyana. During the 5th of these yearly showdowns, these attempted rescues, Nightcrawler is captured and tortured, and his soul becomes corrupted, turning him into a demon. Specifically, he becomes what Scott Summers refers to as Banff Dragon, or is that an acronym? Anyways, he winds up causing the X-Men to lose ground. Teleporting inside the X-Men's force field, he helps kill Beast and Doctor Strange. This allows a horde of Inferno's demons to enter into Manhattan, and we see Dragon Nightcrawler wandering the streets as the demon horde rampages through the city. Now that is dark.
Number 10. Death. Death for all of them. We will litter the path to Krakoa with bodies of all those who stand against us, for there is an apocalypse coming. Those are the words of the first horseman, Death. First appearing in Powers of X number 4, Death is immortal, obviously. He was sealed away on Araco with his other fellow horsemen. which I will expand on a little later. His mother, Genesis, along with multiple other mutants, made the island of Arakko their home, even putting towers up to protect them from the threat of demons, led by Annihilation. That unfortunately didn't last very long. The demons ended up destroying the towers and attacked all of the mutants. Desperate to save Arakko, Death sent the Summoner to Earth. And who is the Summoner, you ask? Well, Number 9, the Summoner. The son of War himself, born hundreds of years ago on that same island of Arakko, he was part of a group of mutant wizards who referred to themselves as the Summoners. So, what could they do? Well, they could summon various creatures of Arakko. Bam, just like that. So while all those mutants were being attacked, the Summoner was sent away to the Immense Dimension. He was sent to find his grandfather and also carried a portion of Arakko with him. His grandfather, being Apocalypse, was needed in order to save Arakko. Not bad at all. Being the grandson of Apocalypse must be nice. My grandparents were cool, but they were never like Immense Dimension cool. They just liked Werther's originals. His powers are pretty interesting. Like I said, he's able to summon and control every dark beast of Arakko. Demon elementals, you name it. I mean, in one instance, he actually held one of Cable's bombs as it went off, and it didn't even faze the guy. Number 8, Famine. Also an OG member of the Four Horsemen, Famine is the son of Apocalypse, first in his name to serve. Similarly to the Summoner, Famine had also ended up in the Immense Dimension. So after his mother died to the hands of immense dark god, Annihilation, Famine and his other siblings were approached shortly after the omniversal Magistrix Saturnine, who then asked both sides of the war to participate in the challenge of the 10 swords for victory, and they agreed. Famine is also centuries old, as he is immortal as well. Number 7, Jack Starsmore. Making his debut in X-Men Apocalypse vs. Dracula issue 1, Jack Starsmore was actually born into a lesser house of the clan Akaba. See, part of the Starsmore bloodline, he wasn't treated with too much respect. The person that gave him the hardest time was Hamilton Slade, his cousin, who I'll talk about in 1 minute. He had a pretty unique mutation that made him stand out from the rest. That being, he can breathe fire. Yeah, he's a pyrokinetic who straight up shoots fire out of his mouth. Guy must kill it at parties. Oh, and he can also absorb fire too with his mouth. So if anything lights on fire in your kitchen, maybe you're cooking something and there's a little plume of dust, Jack Starsmore can just suck it up. He was a child when he was deemed a servant to the council and realized he was a small fish in a very big and very overpowered sea. He had to make up for this lost strength, so he would always go above and beyond his duties to make sure everybody around him is happy and safe. We love him. Number 6, Evan Sabinor. Sounds pretty familiar to in Sabinor. Well, that's because he's his clone. Yeah, making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Force issue 7, Evan was created from the blood of a fallen young Apocalypse after he was killed by Phantom X. So once Warren Worthington became the Horseman of Death, Archangel, he actually was on his way to replace Apocalypse. Phantom X used that small bit of blood and combined it with the world. The world being a scientific facility that's the size of his palm. And he made a clone of Sabinor. Not a bad secret at all. Phantom X finally revealed the secret project and used the clone Evan, a good guy at heart, and he sent him after Archangel. It worked because while they were fighting, Psylocke was able to come in and attack him with the Seed of Life.
Number 5, Rachel Summers. Let's hop over to Earth 811 for a second to talk about Rachel Summers, aka Prestige, aka Marvel Girl, aka Phoenix. As an alternate reality daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, Rachel inherited some pretty sweet powers. Classified as an Omega level mutant, she is shown to have inherited all of her mother's psionic abilities, with a few extras shown in there for fun. She can manipulate time and is shown incredibly strong empathetic powers that enables her to control, manipulate, and alter the feelings, sensations, and emotions of other sentient beings. Rachel spent quite a while as a brainwashed quote-unquote hound for the authorities, forced to hunt down her fellow mutants before merging with the Phoenix Force, and was then considered the one true Phoenix, as all her abilities and capabilities were maxed out, and the only limit to her power was her own will and imagination. Hopeless might still love all things Jean, but Rachel has definitely proved a more successful host, as they state that adult Jean was definitely the most powerful, but she had her ups and downs, destroying a planet, killing her friends. Rachel, I think, rode that wave just a little bit better. Check out Rachel for yourself, starting with 1981's X-Men number 141. Number 4, Professor X. Already one of the most powerful mutants out there, and definitely one of the best known Marvel characters as well. Now, if you're not familiar with Charles Xavier's abilities, let me give you a quick reminder. He is an alpha level mutant said to possess the most powerful brain in existence. Because of this, he is said to be the world's greatest telepath, possessing vast psionic powers. Now, funnily enough, in one often overlooked X-Men storyline, Charles Xavier briefly wielded some of the Phoenix's power and was known as the Bald Phoenix. He he became a member of the Starjammers, a group of space pirates, and was seriously injured pretty early on, slipping into a coma. He was still able to communicate with them telepathically though, and he eventually merged with the consciousness of the team ship to further assist them. His body seemingly dies in the stasis capsule he was kept in, but his consciousness lived on. Fast forward a bit and it is revealed that Falcon is actually the Phoenix Force, which was residing within the body of Excalibur's Rachel Summers at the time. Rachel had the Force drained from her body by Deathbird, and it was placed in a canister that was later transferred over to Charles. Months after that battle, it's revealed that the Phoenix Force completely revives Charles and imbued him with limited Phoenix Force abilities. Now, although he didn't possess the full power, he was still a formidable foe, trust me. I mean, that coupled with his unparalleled telepathic powers would make him one of the most powerful Phoenix hosts the Marvel Universe has ever seen. And considering the somewhat unnerving mental state he's had since founding the mutant nation Krakoa, Xavier could very well turn into Marvel's most dangerous Phoenix as well. Check out this lesser known storyline starting with 1990's X-Men Spotlight 1, Starjammers number 1. Number 3, Wolverine. Logan of Earth 14,412 mirrors his mainstream counterpart's history up to the point where King Loki completely wiped out the humankind to make his brother Thor suffer. Logan ended up dying but was chosen as the new host of the Phoenix Force, and he began traveling the universe, wiping out celestial bodies to aid the universe as it met its slow death. After encountering a future Loki, Logan was convinced to go back in time and prevent Loki from ever gathering the Infinity Stones, which he gladly did because it gave Logan the opportunity to see his long dead friends one last time. After Wolverine returns to the future, he comes in contact with an old friend, Thor, and then much to Thor's surprise, Logan attacks him pretty much on sight. The two battle it out before eventually putting aside their differences to team up and take down a much bigger threat, Doom. Old Man Phoenix and Thor then face off against Doom, who reduced Logan to nothing but a skeleton with the spirit of Vengeance's Hellfire, but Logan resurrected and sacrificed himself to transfer the Phoenix Force into Mjolnir, which helped Thor defeat Doom once and for all. Give this Logan story a read for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2017's Marvel Legacy, number 1. Number 2, The Phoenix 5. During 2012's Avengers vs. X-Men storyline, the Phoenix Force is heading towards Earth, and the Avengers, obviously fearing the almighty entity, made Iron Man and Giant Man prepare a disruptor weapon to kill the Phoenix Force. Although instead of killing it, the blast alters the entity and divides it into 5 fragments, which forcefully bonds with 5 X-Men: Namor, Magik, Colossus, Emma Frost, and Cyclops. While the heroes tried to use this awesome power very gallantly and responsibly, they ended up leaving quite a bit of damage in their wake. Hopeless stated that they tried to do good things, and they ended up losing their minds, causing massive world problems and killing Charles Xavier in the process. Also, adding the fact that it seems the more good you try to achieve with this power, the more likely your efforts will backfire. Namor is the first to lose the fragment after being defeated by the Avengers, with Magik and Colossus pretty close behind after they were tricked into defeating each other. Emma Frost, half of the Phoenix Force, was later stolen by Cyclops to increase his power during the final battle with the Avengers and X-Men, and while Cyclops, yeah, he's a bit of a special case, so let's just focus on him for a bit. He was the last one to fall under the corrupted influence of the Phoenix Force and becomes Dark Phoenix after hosting all 5 fragments. But Jean Grey's essence convinces him to let the Phoenix leave his body as he is attacked by Hope Summers and the Scarlet Witch. He gets the Phoenix Force once again in order to decimate the Children of Tomorrow during the insertion between Earth 616 and Earth 1610, retaining the Phoenix even after the remaining universes crashed together, but eventually lost it one last time when he was killed by Dr. Doom. There's a little bit more to the story, but I will let you check it out for yourself, starting with the first appearance of the Phoenix 5 in 2012's Avengers vs. X-Men, number 5. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey, the most powerful and complete Phoenix Force and host combination around. While not acting as the avatar of the Phoenix Force, Jean is already a force to be reckoned with, as she is an Omega level mutant and one of the most powerful telepaths, telekinetics, and psions out there. Her abilities were suppressed at a young age by Charles Xavier after she connected with her dying friend, Annie Richardson. Jean's telepathy was activated when she was transported into the future where Xavier was dead. As stated by Death, Jean is the favored and true avatar of the Phoenix Force. As its avatar, she can greatly increase her powers by tapping into the life energies of those who haven't been born yet. The Phoenix Force also allows its avatars to manifest additional powers, especially in terms of Jean as its quote-unquote host, house, and self. These powers include interstellar travel, cosmic pyrokinesis, immortality, and existence mastery, which means she is able to control the entirety of existence. Now, as I said before, Jean is the strongest and most complete host of the Phoenix Force, and as such, she is even capable of forcibly ripping it out of another host and forcing its status upon herself. There was even a period of time that the two completely merged together and became the White Phoenix of the Crown, allowing her to access the full capabilities of the Almighty Phoenix. Check out Jean and her story for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1963's X-Men, number 1.